Recording now. Hi, everybody, and welcome. It's October 25th, 2023. People who are new or catching this video out of series, you just might not know, but I'm working on a treadmill now while I do my stuff. So if you're wondering why I move around like this, it's because I walk on a treadmill, and I also put up my constant force fields of 5G protection with my crystals here too. So all of that brief intro aside, today's lesson is level 2, lesson 10 from the original Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans. This is about, let me read from my notes so that I say this correctly, the sun's senses and the human endocannabinoid system. And you might be saying, Aurora, are you going to be talking about cannabis, pot, marijuana, wacky tobacco, and many other derogatory terms for, and I was, yes, that is exactly what I'm going to be talking about today. But what I'm going to be talking about are a couple of things. Analogies between the information and energy that the sun sends out and what it has and hasn't been receiving back due to those pesky occupiers of the interstices and the blockades that have been on the membrane of death, in direct analogy, not even loose metaphorical analogy, to lack of signaling in your own body due to dietary restrictions and social inhibitions to eating dietary cannabis, and relating all of this to the accumulated pain signals of the galaxy. But all of that, prepare now for rant incoming, in the recontextualization of we should not normalize the presence of anything on the membrane of death. And you must remember and reclaim that this is your energy field and technically should be 100% you, and not have other things in there either making your energy field wobble or inhabiting it in some ways. So thank you. That's just a brief overview of today. Okay. I used to save lesson 18 for the end of level 1 because I didn't want people to be like clawing out their own eyes, rocking back and forth and thinking that they're filled with demons or, negative thought entities and things like that. It's actually something that was a very real concern to me of how people would react to that information, not only about reverberative memories of planetary trauma, memories or reverberations within your own ancestral history of your own biological lineage, stuff that's happened within your own individuated body form, anytime you've been violated, any violations that bring up, and also the sense of horror at something being an inhabitant of you, a monster being inside of you, but that is not actually you. And this goes to literally almost every horror movie. What's that? He's calling from inside the house. He's inside the house. So you know what I'm talking about. The sense of you thought that you had boundaries, you thought that you had an impregnable fortress, and then the very thing that you thought you were keeping out was inside of your place that's supposed to be there. So, okay. Because I recognize that this just brings up a lot, this pushes a lot of buttons or is a huge trigger for people. And so I want to speak about it very, very responsibly in how I am portraying this, and also make certain that I'm not just, making people marinate, reactivating your trauma. Don't want to just reactivate your trauma. So the first thing that I want to do is go back to the very, very, very beginning. Just fiddling with stuff over here. Okay, we got more beautiful people joining in the meeting. So you guys know this is I don't know if you can hear my toaster ding. I'm making some beautiful almond bread. We'll have that after the cardio marathon here on the treadmill. This is a 3-dimensional sculpture, but it's actually a 4th-dimensional object and higher. It's moving through time and is made out of these flowing figure eights and also these flowing vortex shapes. This bottom quadrant over here is actually a spiral pathway of multiple different possible timelines. And then, of course, the central core timeline, which is not a spiral, but is the most direct route, which is straight. And what I'm going to do now is refresh your memory with my little shorthand of what I do when I do the drawing over here of what the time vortex is. You know that it's the bottom quadrant of that sculpture. Yes, all of this relates to the human endocannabinoid system. I'm actually very serious in all the things that I'm sharing with you today. Okay, so wait, do this, and then just get some different colors. Okay, so I'm gonna make it the same colors that I did in the recorded whiteboard. Watch the recorded whiteboard. It's still relevant, even though, of course, I'm going to give you some updated viewpoints or contextualization. So that's a hugely exaggerated cross-section of the time vortex. Let's get a good color. So this purple color is your infinity timeline, and it is perfectly lined up with this wormhole over here. The wormhole is hugely exaggerated. All of these are not drawn to scale, but this timeline is the one and only timeline that is skinny enough to be able to get through that wormhole. It's skinny enough and it's in the proper alignment. It's the right shape. So that timeline is you when you are the right shape to be able to exit this area of the vortex. And where I'm scribbling in yellow, this is what we call embodiment and life. And I actually think that embodiment and life is a super cool, fun, happy, positive thing in place. I think that it's absolutely awesome and fantastic and great. And I recognize that many people here also have the reverberative trauma of continually recycling and having to do it all over again. And this world was not about accumulated trauma, but it was meant to be always that you could easily find this pathway guided by your highest senses, remaining in alignment with God, which is also this infinity point up here, which is also the 0th dimension, which is also both the source and the destination. And as a brief aside, this time that we're going through right now is so distorted, and there's so much distortion in personal perception and belief systems that what I have found is I'm at the point where I just go with energy. I just go with the primacy of source, the primacy of the origin of light and of consciousness, not moving it through belief systems, even Christianity flavored, Christ consciousness flavored, all of those things. I think at a certain point they all become weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and just go with that central core timeline, who you are when you are the embodiment of God, the divine presence, and returning to source, because that's what you have. You have the original origin point, which is the 0th dimension. Then, of course, in the larger full sculpture, you can see how this relates to like a whole big giant circle. And that is your journey here into reality. And then you begin your journey over here at the periphery, and you have many, 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 many failed attempts. These are shown here in straight lines, but you recognize that they're actually these long curved spirals, but I'm just not drawing them because the diagram becomes too difficult to decipher. And that each time you do these timelines, you're doing life a little bit better. You are groundhog's daying, we're now turning it into a verb, exploring many, many possible iterations of how the choose your own adventure novel of your life can go, and eventually you will be able to align fully with the central core timeline. And to mirror what I taught about in the recorded lesson, each one of these timelines has a final moment. I'm making these blue dots here so that you can recognize that those are the accumulated experience of everything that's gone on up until then. So here's your birth, here's baby's first birthday, your 5-year birthday, sweet 16, going to college, and then age 33, and then getting hit by a truck. All right, all of the major milestones of your life, and all of those major milestones create an imprint that is held in this final moment of your life. And that final moment of your life could be considered like your hard drive, even though you know I'm not a transhumanist, I just use these analogies, your accumulated data or life history for that particular timeline. Not for everything, but just for that particular timeline, getting up to that particular trajectory. And now let's draw the sun, because the sun is a big part of this. This is about the sun's endocannabinoid system and your endocannabinoid system. Here's the sun. And what is supposed to be happening throughout your whole entire journey of going through this area of life is you're supposed to be in a direct rapport with the sun. You are supposed to be in a real-time broadcast with the sun. So again, when I become confused or overwrought, or I'm in this very distorted world, as we all are, this is really some of the best guidance that I can give you in this moment. I'm like, wow, like what can you really believe in? What can you really rely upon? Our senses, pineal gland, inner knowing, all of these things are just like really distorted. everybody's in a fog and a miasma, and it's very, very challenging to know where to go and what to do. Here are the things that you can always return to, that you can always rely upon, that are beyond any level of personal interpretation system. It's beyond anthropomorphism. So this also works whether you are a flatworm or a dolphin or a human or a plant or the planet. That is the source of everything, infinity, where you come from and where you are also returning to. And that is the overlapping everythingness, seeming impossibility, moment of complete novelty that you emerge from, experience reality from, and then also return to. And people's trauma and frustration at having to go through the karmic washing machine so many times, and it's not fair. When people think of karma, they think that there is some sense of justice, but we can also recognize that there's a huge amount of injustice in the way that this concept has been perpetrated and then distorted, enforced in a very distorted and limited and non-effective way on humanity. Because I want to validate it by saying the karmic washing machine, but you have gone through at times the arbitrary washing machine of pure punishment, right? And then having to do it over and over and over again. Your life was actually not meant to be just torture or a battery creating trauma for other things to eat and exploit, but was meant to be a refocuser. The membrane of death is meant to be an impersonal force of actual cosmic love. So getting away from the anthropomorphic interpretation of it being, like that Ingmar Bergman movie, a shrouded form with a scythe that's going to cut your head off, not anthropomorphic, scary being, boogeyman, who's going to cut off your head, and also not someone who's like punishing you because you're doing the bad, wrong thing, but an impersonal force. And when I say of love, not the huggy, lovey, snuggly type of love, but the love of a teacher that is simply very fair and balanced and gives you feedback on what you've been doing. So that movie Groundhog's Day, guy didn't do a good job, you hit the membrane of death over and over, repeat over and over and over. And when things are fair in a pristine system, P.S. I love that you got your little furry guy right there. Hugs to your furry guy. When you do things right, then you don't have to repeat over and over and over. So our original blueprint of how to do life was to come here into a body, maintaining your divine connection the whole entire time. So that means staying connected to the sun and staying connected to God, the abstract divine presence, and the zeroth dimension. So to finish that sentence, when you feel overwrought or distorted or don't know which direction to go, like, what religion do I believe in? Who is real? What the F is going on? I don't know. It's mommy, daddy, somebody help me. The sun in the sky, and the origin of light itself and the source of information itself. These are things that are primary, that you can rely upon. These are foundations beyond the anthropomorphic or human embodiment interpretation systems and beyond any level of religious interpretation or deification. So those are things you can always focus in on, even when it's the going is very, very rough right now, okay? And you know that is where you are returning to, like you are returning to light speed. What is the purpose of your life? That you are in this refinery, that this loving presence of the membrane of death guides you away from certain non-truthful iterations. Bad math, things that don't add up. 1 + 1 does not equal 3. And the membrane of death guides you away from those eventualities. Every single one of those blue dots, that is the final denouement, the final moment of your life on that timeline. Like I joked, the guy, age 33 and then hit by a truck, right? That final moment of being hit by a truck and everything that's been up to there was some good stuff in that life. This is not about moralism or any sense of personal worth. It's a question of whether the right choices were made or the right directions and vectors were achieved. And looking at it in that abstract sense, things become a lot more impersonal and a lot, hopefully, more fair in being separated from the very fraught human emotions that are involved in recognizing death. So it's supposed to be a fair assessment of the calculations that you've done throughout your life with every single choice that you're making, with every single behavioral choice that you're making. Ah, beautiful. We love your little doggy. Um, um, and every single one of those blue dots is meant to be you. So this is, I'm talking now in the pristine world. This is not Saturday mornings. Saturday mornings when I do my Path of Light class, I'm like, la, 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 let's only talk about the pristine world. But now I'm talking openly about the things that are not pristine, because in this class we call them putis. Those pesky occupiers of the interstices, hat tip to Pedro, he's just not in class right now, but he attends quite regularly, came up with that acronym because I'm always calling them that instead of calling them like demonic horror monsters, even though they are like demonic horror monsters. But here is my rant. So my thing that I shared from 10 years ago, I talk about the pesky occupiers of the interstices, blockades, emotional blockages, and residues that reside on the membrane of death, but which haven't circulated out of there. So it's not a mystery, but let's just say it's not fully defined as to how consciousness and any amount of consciousness ended up on those membranes. And I propose that it relates somewhat to different levels of technological-based time experiments, or if not experiments, attempts to exploit time using technology. We're talking about the creation of artificial Merkabim, both on Mars and ancient Atlantis, both of which are ongoing concurrent events that you're experiencing. But if you die right, if you do death in the right way, you find yourself on the membrane of death, and then the flowing waterfall of energy that is actually very loving dissolves away the aspects of yourself that are untruthful, and you are disintegrated, brought back to the beginning, and start again. That's what I draw in that little, looping. But every time you start again, you're closer and closer to the ideal posture, like, those runners at the beginning of a race, the ideal posture to be able to run the race effectively. In the pristine world, we all started out at the ideal posture. I should draw this. In the pristine world, you all started out here. You started out over here. You did not have to start out at the edges. And then, of course, just stayed in perfect alignment going up and down that central core timeline. In this world that we presently are leaving, people start out on the edge over here, and then gradually, their starting point at the beginning line of the race of life moves closer and closer to that perfect posture, all right? So in the ideal world, you started out here in the right alignment, and you are connected to the sun and really the whole entire stellar network the entire time that you are in existence. And that whole entire time gives you not only a real-time broadcast to be able to be saying to the sun and the stars and the world of pure light, this is me as an individuated creature, and I'm experiencing this. And the sun and the stars know that in each moment and are able to respond and augment your life in real time, as opposed to the present system where the sun largely does not hear from you during your life until you hit the membrane of death, and then you are able to kind of like turn in your homework. You've been doing your homework very assiduously throughout your whole entire life, but here's the problem. Implanted genetic blockages and the stuff that's on the membrane of death, these two things are intimately tied together in terms of causality, and they both add up to make it so that humans are not effective real-time broadcasters. And the experience of you as an embodied human is that you don't have clarity of mind. You actually have like a chattering, constantly verbalizing mind, a distracted mind, a distorted mind that prevents the signal of your sensory experience from being broadcast effectively to the realm of pure consciousness and pure sentience and pure light. So traditionally what has happened is you have to go through these many multiple time loops because the sun literally could not perceive you in the moment. And that's not the way that this system was designed. You were designed as one of the sun's sensory organs to come into being and to have the experiences that you have, and to tell the sun and stars, of course, all about it in the moment. So like while you're like whatever eating an ice cream, you're like, this is what ice cream tastes like, and I'm going to broadcast that to the sun, or whatever, walking on some grass or doing whatever you do. You're broadcasting in the moment that experience to the sun. And of course, if you're in distress, or if you're in disease, or if you're in imminent moment of catastrophe and devastation, then you would broadcast that to the sun as well, and that the sun would be able to change the music that it's playing, because that is how the sun generates reality structures. What the sun does is emanate all of these types of like time loops, and then dependent upon what those time loops interact with and the feedback that the sun gets, the sun is like, oh, I got to retune. I got to send, this all kind of shrinks back in, and the sun's like, let's do it slightly differently the next time. So commonalities include with your own life the sense that you're honing in on something. You are refining your experience. You are getting better and better at what you are doing, or closer and closer to the ideal, perfected vision. On the one hand, that's very positive because it's not an all or nothing. It's like, if you moderately screw up, you have the opportunity to change and rectify and amend and build, erase and rebuild, right? So that's actually positive, because otherwise you'd be like, throw it out the window. Like something went wrong, one little tiny thing went wrong, that's it, the entire thing, throw it out the window. Please think of it like this. You see these paintings that are in the background. I know you can't see, the lighting is not that perfect, but I spend a long time, sometimes a whole year, just measuring out and drawing a painting. And then when I start to get to the point of putting color on it, if I make one little tiny mistake, I'm not like, that's it, throw the whole thing out the window, start from the beginning, go to the lumber yard, buy more wood, make the entire panel again, start the drawing again. I'm like, no, of course not. I have invested a lot in the materials and in the time, and a lot of it, like 99.9% of it, is really, really good. One little mistake does not mean I threw the whole entire thing out the window. What I do is, like, I have these really tiny sharp razor blades, and I either scratch away or carve away out of the painting surface the part that's wrong, fill it in, do it again. I fix that little tiny spot. And of course, I work very carefully too and try not to make mistakes. But the point being, if you make a mistake on a large masterpiece, complex artwork that you've already invested a huge amount in, you don't just throw the whole thing out the window. This world and life and consciousness is a huge, giant, amazing, complex masterpiece of artwork. It costs a lot more than the lumber at the lumber yard to be able to make a new panel. You don't just throw something like that out the window. So the sun is also in a process. As you are in a process of, in your individual life trajectory, learning to perfect your math and make the right conscious choices and navigation choices to be able to stay in alignment with divinity and get through that wormhole and return into alignment back to the destination source. The sun is doing something very similar. The sun is emitting in these complex spherical patterns that are like tendrils of time. And that our feedback as organisms tells the sun whether or not these are accurate and effective time structures. And the sun gets that feedback and is not egocentric and defensive. It's not like, what, you don't like what I sent out there? Like when your mom makes food or whatever, when you're a little kid, like, eat your Brussels sprouts. It's not like that. It is not like that. The sun is like, oh, I need to fix that up because someone's sick or about to die, or maybe even just not having a good time, just not optimum quality of existence. So our lives as the sensory organs of the sun are hugely important, and the sun is hugely loving and responsive to us. These are basics that you can rely upon. Because I know that you're kind of getting like, where am I coming from on all this here? I'm also, pardon me, it's a cloudy day and I'm drinking a little bit of my superfood coffee for some energy during class, so pardon me. People don't know right now, like, who the F do you listen to? Where is God? How come there's so much bad stuff happening? I think you're relating a little bit to what I'm saying here. And the answer is, God is not absent. You haven't been abandoned. It's not a captainless ship or, just a random, whatever, spiral down the cosmic toilet. No, not at all. The sun, the divine presence, the source, pure light, pure consciousness is infinitely loving and infinitely present, and absolutely wants to do a good job of reality creation and sustenance, and that the real challenge has been not getting enough information, not receiving enough information back from us in the time that it is relevant to be able to make the changes that are necessary. So there was a time before there was death. There was a time before death was invented. Everybody went up the central core timeline. Nobody ever hit the membrane of death. There was nothing on the membrane of death. Dun, dun, dun. This is what we know as ancient or concurrent Atlantis. A beautiful time of immortals, and you're actually still there. Gods and goddesses, that's who you are, really, at the core of your being. And then we also are here in this layer of reality where death is now a thing that you can explore. Death is now an opportunity or a side dish on your plate that you can have that experience. And other organisms have had that experience, and the key thing is to distinguish. When you go onto the membrane of death, you have the great assessment, which is similar to retrospection in the Ascension process. The giant clipboard. Wait, I have to hold this in order to gesture properly. Pretending that I'm holding my giant clipboard. And hi, you're dead. And this is your giant clipboard. And I'm happy that you're here for your assessment. And here's all of the red X's and the things that you did not do properly in your life, which is why you ended up dead. And everybody who's good and everybody who receives that information upon their death, they're like, oh, like now I'm getting all of this. I wish I could have known that when I was alive. Give me another chance. That's almost the universal response. Kind of like talking to the coach. The coach, put me back in. I can do better next time now that I see the error of my ways. And that's positive. That is soul growth, right? So that means that in your experience of being on the membrane of death, you get your life assessment, are able to achieve that perspective that you really should have while you're actually in life. And then what happens is your DNA is like a sweater that gets unknit, gonna pull out all of the loops, or a crochet, pulling out all of the loops until you're just a giant ball of yarn again. And you go back to the beginning of the time vortex at the starting line where the runners are poised, ready to get going, and you try again. You do not occupy the membrane of death. You do not hang out there. You definitely do not create some kind of an empire there. You definitely do not siphon energy off of the realm of the living, which is this area inside of the time vortex, in order to sustain your existence there, or semi-existence in a kind of, limbo in between world space. You don't do that. You do what's fair and the way that things are supposed to be done. Somehow, I don't have explanations for it, but somehow other levels of organism or consciousness have found their way to the membrane of death, but are not dissolving. They're not looking at their clipboard. They're not getting their life assessment. They're not learning their lessons. They're not dissolving the calcified aspects of their ego that are when you have to say, I was wrong. That's the most painful thing. Hi, welcome, Pedro. I'm happy that you're here. I was just talking about you. What's the most painful thing that can ever happen to you in your life? It's not getting your arms or legs chopped off. It's not getting your eyes poked out with hot pokers. The most painful thing you can ever have to do is to admit that you're wrong. The ego must admit that it was occasionally wrong, and then do better. These things are not admitting to their mistakes, and they are instead being blasted with tons and tons and tons of the love energy that flows through the membrane of death, but somehow it is not dissolving them, and that they are there as blockages. Blockages that represent your genetic blockages, blockages that were installed around the same time as what is known as the fall of consciousness, that created the diminished contact that you have with the sun and the stars. And the reason why anyone can even die is because there is a disconnect between you and the sun and the stars. Because if the sun knew, oh, you are in danger of imminent death, I'm going to change what I'm emitting immediately. And the sun literally emits a new timeline so that you don't have to die, if the sun knows what is going on. But if there is a blockade in your DNA or in your chakras, then it means that the energy cannot get through. there is not a real-time broadcast, and that you hit the membrane of death. And when you hit the membrane of death, I don't know if I have a hard drive, but just imagine that I'm holding up like my hard drive here, and it's like, oh, you hand in your homework to the teacher. Here's my life. Here's everything that has happened to me from the moment of birth on this particular timeline. Boom, it's who I am. And this is what I also mean by when I say higher dimensional beings and organisms and creatures can read you like a book. Everything you've ever done, everything you've ever done. That's right. You guys are like, hope not everything. Not the time that I was like sitting on the couch picking my nose. Yes, that moment too was indelibly written in the book of you. Yes, yes, yes. But it's not just like the embarrassment clips reel of like every bodily process you've ever experienced. No one's, embarrassing you or anything like that just for being alive and having a body. Or even true things that you might want to hide that you're shameful of, like whatever, you were on drugs literally in the gutter or something like that. None of that is looked at as a sense of highlighting your shames, or I don't even want to use the word shame, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not an out of balance viewpoint that highlights your diminishments or the worst things that have ever happened to you or that you have had to endure, but is a balanced perspective. Because when you look at and read a person, you read everything, including why did you take those drugs? Why did you end up in the gutter? How did you respond afterwards? And then eventually, you became a drug counselor and helped a lot of people. I literally know people that have had that life trajectory. So it's a very, very different world to look at someone so intimately and know everything about what they've been through. Nothing is hidden, but you're really reading them with eyes of love, a very, very loving gaze. And that is what the sun does. The sun is like, oh, thank you very much. Like a good teacher, I'll take that homework, yoink, and I'll read it all and be like, okay, I wish I had known this earlier. I wish I had known this 40 years ago. I would have stopped you from having these negative turmoil experiences, and I definitely would have stopped you from going onto the membrane of death. I would have created better, more positive timelines. The sun didn't know. So this speaks to really big questions right now. If you might be feeling a sense of abandonment, our world is like very perilous, and being like, what is going on? It doesn't, Cosmic Complaints Department, this is you shaking your fist. Cosmic Complaints Department, hello, is anybody up there? Do you know what is going on down? You might get like this. It is not okay, and that's all appropriate for you to feel that way. And the answer is the Cosmic Complaints Department is actually very attentive. It is not a large impersonal bureaucracy that doesn't care, whatever SHIT about you. It actually cares about you profoundly. It hasn't been getting signal from you, and it hasn't been getting signal from you because of the genetic degradation that happened to humanity a long, long time ago, and also to the blockades that have been on the membrane of death up into this point, up into this generation. And the things that are blockades on the membrane of death, when I spoke about them 10 years ago, when I've been teaching about them, it's never been my intention to normalize this. Like, it's been my intention to actually give you the greatest level of self-empowerment teaching that you can have to know about what's going wrong so that you can fix it, so that you can reestablish your real-time rapport between you and the sun. That is everything of what Flying Rainbow Lasagna is. So not to just say, oh, these blockages exist on the membrane of death, these blockages exist in my chakras, these blockages exist in my DNA. That's just the way it is, and it's been that way for a very long amount of time. I'm like, no. Flying Rainbow Lasagna past any blockages, and also get that information to the sun so that the sun is like, oh, that's what's going on in my creation. We got to fix things now. That is what I want you to know. So the stuff that is on the membrane of death, again, I have only loose stories to be able to tell you about how something ended up there. But some of the stuff, consciousness or fragments or thought entities that are there, are things that once had consciousness. So this is how I'm ranting against my own work from 10 years ago, because I talk about what to do with those organisms or residues, send them back to the galactic central sun for reprocessing. But now what I really want you to do is send things to entropy. And these are two actually different responses. And so here's why I have to kind of make this distinction, because if I say something once had consciousness, like let's say person A developed some kind of time travel technology or an artificial Merkaba or was a scientist or whatever, blah, blah, blah. We're making up stories here. But somehow they created this artificial Merkaba time twisting technology, and it went horribly awry, and they found themselves smeared on the edge of the singularity, endlessly circling the cosmic toilet, not effectively being able to have a life resolution and die and then try it all over again, like kind of like hovering between lives. And that they, from that perspective, that not only person A, but person A and all of the, group that it is with in its semi-limbo state existence, the whole entire thing is like, well, we're going to have to figure out some way to get energy, and we're going to have to figure out some way to kind of not, swirl down the cosmic toilet and go into entropy, so we better find a way to farm these humans over here. This is kind of like a loose story, but I don't know exactly what time twisting type of technology was used, or whether they did it accidentally or on purpose, or accidentally on purpose. You know what I mean? Because some scientists might think, the singularity, what if I get myself on board of I'm going to strap myself into a spaceship, I'm going to fly myself to the edge of a singularity, then I'll live forever. You get it? Kind of like a very distorted quest for immortality that might bring them to a type of immortality existence, but not a positive immortality. Can you tell, like, yellow caution flags are waving? That is not how you do immortality. No, maybe possibly a very benighted attempt to hack the system. Like maybe they found out a little bit about the way that the system was structured. It's like, maybe I could be immortal if I do this, this, and this, and it blows up horribly in their face. Again, these are all loose stories. But what matters is if that organism or group of people had consciousness originally, and they made the ultimate bad math, ultimate wrong math, and ended up not only on the membrane of death, but stuck on the membrane of death in a way that they could never recognize their mistake, could never rectify it, could never get back to the beginning and undo it, that would be, like a terrible thing. And that torment would be analogous to pain signals that are unresolved in the entire overarching galactic body. And your brain and the neurology of the stars are totally direct analogies. They are fractal microcosms, not mere metaphors. They are literalisms. Your brain is a tiny version of what is happening in the sun and the stars itself. And so in the lesson from 10 years ago, I want to be not too fragmented, because I want to talk about your human neurology and how things work in terms of cell signaling. But then I also really want to talk about what is the correct response to this ultimate wrongness of something being there on the membrane of death, and not to accept that it's there, even though it's been there for such a long amount of time, that it has its presence there and the reverberative repercussions into human dynamics, your society, your emotions, everything that I taught you about the economy of hell and how all of that stuff exists. These are all total imbalances and injustices. They shouldn't exist at all. They've existed for so long in your culture that you seem to see them as fair, even though they're not fair. I released the information about lesson 18 very, very selectively, and now everybody talks about this everywhere, because I didn't want people to fly off the handle, jump, into levels of self-concern, because this is inside of you. This chakra represents your own time body. Of course, you have many different layers of it on a scale, from your red chakra, which is the biggest one, to your violet chakra, which is the smallest one. So this is just a simplification in not showing every layer. But if you have demonic forces or a hell realm that is here on the membrane of death, I didn't want people to be like, oh no, there's demons inside of me, there's demons inside of that guy, there's demons inside of that guy. And then I jokingly call this to Dwayne Hubler. That's a hat tip to Kurt Vonnegut. Great short story, Breakfast of Champions. Read it. It's good whatever metaphor, but someone reads a science fiction book and totally loses touch with reality and becomes violent towards others. I would never want you to do that. I would never want you to Dwayne Hubler and have an emotionally overblown reaction to recognizing these things. What I would want you to do is to fly rainbow lasagna. Be like, that's a bunch of poop crap hole. That's not supposed to be there. Time for me to jump over any blockages and do some cosmic house cleaning and talk to the sun about all of this. That's what I would want you to do. But it's really, really important in terms of um, exerting your sovereignty and your boundaries to recognize if your chakra is the place where the membrane of death is located. And if the membrane of death is being occupied by these negative, unwholesome fragments or residues or presences or former presences, and they are totally flouting cosmic law and not responding to cosmic justice and not learning from their giant clipboard of failures, then it's inside of you. Totally appropriate for you to do something about it because it's inside of you. It would be like if something were happening in your bloodstream or in your pancreas or in your digestive tract. Be like, wow, that's something happening inside of me. I am the sheriff of Auroraville, and I get to choose what's going on inside of my boundaries. So this should be a recognition of ultimate empowerment, the appropriateness of your own empowerment to do something about this. But now please gird your loins. This is my rant, because not everything that you're facing is the consciousness residue of something that once was alive. If something was a very, whatever, twisted or distorted scientist, or something that had a consciousness, had a soul, had a body, made a lot of terrible mistakes, ended up smeared on the membrane of death, and was living inside of you, doing a bunch of stuff that really harms you and the rest of the world, that's one thing. But what if what you're interacting with is something that is totally non-being? That never was alive, that never had a soul, that was never conscious, that never lived, that never had baby pictures or diapers or baby babas or a mama or a dada, never had that. Never had that, never wasn't alive, never was in existence, and yet that level of, non-being is somehow interactive with you as being. That stuff you should not send to the galactic central sun for reprocessing. That stuff you should send to entropy immediately, because that represents everything that is non-existence. And so there's some stuff that is a hapless soul on its wayward journey. It's in the wrong spot, and you're like a cosmic law enforcement. You're like pulling someone over, like, you're in the wrong spot. Get off of this road, go over there where you're supposed to be. And the idea is if you go back to the galactic central sun, then you'd be like, the giant clipboard's in your face, can't ignore it, and you must have a reassessment on a soul level in order to be part of the refinery of consciousness, because consciousness is consciousness and soul is soul, and that is something that is indelible, that really can't be disposed of or unmade or whatever, destroyed in some way. So even if you have an aspect of soul or consciousness that is errant, you're still like, okay, like we got to do something with you. We can't just discard you. And so that was appropriate for 10 years ago, but now I really have to recognize a lot of the things that I am interactive with on an energy level, on a consciousness level, on my inner experience, things that make it so difficult to truly connect with Christ in the telepathic realm, to truly connect with the sun and the stars. We're talking about some distortions that go even beyond the original limitations of having stuff smeared on the membrane of death and the original hacking or wobbling of the chakras. There's also something else that's going on. That stuff needs to go to entropy. How can I tell there's something else that's going on? Because I lived here as Aurora in this body with its mortality programming and chakras as you have for like the first 18 years that I was here as a galactic walk-in. So like I definitely calibrated. So like, okay, like these are what distorted chakras are like, and this is what the distorted verbalized mind is like, and this is what the distorted human genome is like, and this is how I fly and remember lasagna up and around all these difficulties. But then with the implantation of nano wetware and the millimeter wave, a lot of things that are just the unmentionables, I'm clutching my pearls, unmentionables on YouTube, but which I talk about very, very openly in various other forums, that stuff feels totally different. That stuff feels totally different and has to have you have to have a different response and a different approach that is effective to that stuff. So if something has never been in existence and it doesn't have pictures of it, baby diapers, class yearbooks or any kind of thing like that, and it's never been in existence, it's a never was or a non-existence or something that has not ever existed, you cannot send it back to the galactic central sun for reprocessing. Technically it doesn't exist. So that's the stuff that you send to entropy. When I talk about energy and entropy as a state of non-being or total energylessness, So to send something to the galactic central sun actually takes a whole bunch of energy. It's a giant, expensive plane ticket back to the center of consciousness. And for something that doesn't originate from the center of consciousness, that would then make you indebted. Really great, I just spent $1 million to put you on a plane to send you where you're supposed to go to get your assessment. And he's like, haha, suckers, I never actually existed. Thank you for wasting $1 million on my airfare to be able to get up there. I'm exploiting you and I'm not supposed to be there and I'm getting up there, you get it? So now this rant is coming to a close. What happens is you must have a sense of inner discernment in the work that you do, in becoming fully free and fully in charge of your own energy, fully connected to the sun and the source and God, the divine presence, and clearing your chakras or energy field of any presences that aren't supposed to be there. Now you must level up and be able to make a distinction between that which might be a hapless soul, an errant, wayward, very benighted fool that has gone in the wrong direction, and that you can help that out by sending it back for reprocessing, in contrast with signals that have no being, that are non-being, that do not exist, that never existed, and that are somehow interactive or stimulative with you, again, in an inexplicable way, but that which do not deserve the free ride, free ticket, all the way to infinity to be able to be reassessed and re-emitted. That's where I'm coming from on that. Okay, so now I'm going to drink a little bit more coffee, and now we're going to talk about your actual neurology as it relates to my sharing from 10 years ago. You guys are doing great. You're totally with me all the way. For a very long time, humans thought that two things were unidirectional. The first thing they thought was unidirectional was the path of light. From the sun has light coming off of it, and they thought that that light just goes pew, like off away on its journey. And I'm here to tell you that the light from the sun, or the stories or timelines that are emitted from the sun, it's not just unidirectional, something that is emitted from or emerges from the sun and the stars, but that is something that also returns back to the sun and the stars. And this is literally what your presence does. You are the sensory organs of the sun and the stars, along with other beautiful life forms here, including dogs and cats and microbes, okay? And light goes off from the sun until, of course, it goes infinitely, unless, of course, it interacts with some form of matter. And you can be that form of matter. And we're not just talking about optical light that can be absorbed by or reflected off of a surface. We're really talking about the light of pure consciousness, that what you have is an ingestion of information and the experience of a timeline. You're like, wow, I'm here, I'm the sensory organ, I felt stuff happen to me, and then you didn't just feel stuff happen to you. This is, again, the very, very limited objective materialist viewpoint, because you felt stuff happen to you, and then you broadcast that back to the sun and the stars. If you are in a real-time rapport, the sun and the stars heard it and felt it right away. If you do sun gazing, the sun and the stars hear it and feel it right away. So it's like you check in the morning, be like, this is who I am, this is what I'm experiencing, and you go through your day and you do it again at the end of the night as the sun is going down. You're like, yep, here's how my day went. Take the records, like take the, data drives of what I saved up for the day. But if you have no connection, then the sun only gets your information when you die. You hit on the highway, you get hit by the giant truck, kapow, you're dead, smeared across the highway, and then you finally get back to the sun and the stars, and you're like, yep, here's everything I've done for like the past 33 years. And they're like, okay, like we finally got the message, but we wish that we had known about this sooner. So there is, in whatever level of immediacy, a return of information and a return of the light that you have borrowed in order to be here. Start thinking of everything you have, all resources, as being borrowed or gifted from the sun. The elements of your body, literally like things like oxygen and molecular structure of your body that sustain you. Also your consciousness, something that science can't even recognize or weigh. Neurological impulses, resources that sustain you, like cups of coffee and tomatoes and avocados and things like that, and everything, and other organisms. All of this is on loan from the sun. And then the idea is that you are constantly sending it back to the sun in a big giant biofeedback loop. So the objective materialist viewpoint is the unhealthy viewpoint that says it's unidirectional. Like the sun is constantly sending stuff off but never receiving stuff back. That would be like flying blind. That would be like if a bat that has echolocation that relies upon this bouncing back of the signals that it sends out never receives anything back, then the bat would be like, I can't see anything. Or more accurately, I can't hear anything. What's out there? I don't know. Now I'm going to run into things because I don't know what's out there. So the sun and the stars require the bounce back from us in order to effectively know what is the shape of reality and navigate things effectively. The unhealthy objective materialist viewpoint also portrays your human neurology as being unidirectional. Now I'm going to draw a little something for you. So let's say that is, wait, I gotta get a thing. Let's draw your brain. Here is the convoluted surface of your brain. And it's in the same color as the sun because it's meant to be like the sun. Again, direct analogy. And then here's some nerves that go away from your brain. And then here's the axon. And then here's like the end of your nerve. And then here's the beginning of the next nerve, and you can see that there's kind of like a Grand Canyon that they have to jump across. That's the synaptic gap, this cleft over here. And the electrical signaling can't jump across there, so it has to be done through chemical signaling. And that's what these dots are. They're little chemical dots that your nerve impulse gets impulsed from your brain, goes down your nerve, similar to a physical timeline. Got it? I'm using the same colors here, guys. Similar to traveling upon a timeline. Gets to the end of that nerve, but it doesn't just stop. It has to be turned into a new format, translated into a new format, and then broadcast to the rest of the body. So when you do your sun gazing, what you are having to do is this magical thing right here. You have to translate your sensory signal, which I call analog. You know, like an old-fashioned analog record is like an actual needle that actually goes into grooves and actually makes little tiny vibrations to represent sound. It's totally different than everything that you're used to, modern, MP3, CD, digital. All of those things are already digital files. But when you have an analog experience, you must translate it into a digital file. In this case, a digital file is not in any way representing transhumanism, but representing something that is a pure abstraction. How do you translate the sensation of biting into an avocado and the feelings, tastes, and nutrients that you get from there and your neurological stimulation into something that the sun over here, this guy over here, can receive and perceive? You must translate it into some form of abstraction, which is what this is over here. Let's get an abstraction color. You have to turn this signal into an abstraction, which you can then broadcast to the sun in a language that the sun can actually receive, and then it can have the conception. Conceive of conception, giving birth, babies, reproduction, creating reality. All of these are root words that are related. You must translate your neural impulses of what it is to be embodied in a physical analog structure into something that is non-physical, that is a purely symbolic state, to be able to send it back to the sun and the stars. And that is literally what you do with your higher faculties, these areas up here, specifically your throat chakra, your indigo chakra, and your crown chakra here. These three aspects of your being are what you use in order to translate the physicality presence of what it is to be alive as you in your world into something that is a pure abstraction that can then be broadcast non-locally to the sun and the stars, so that that level of mentality can even perceive and then make sense of what you are sending to it in terms of a signal. So now back to my whiteboard, the unhealthy objective materialist viewpoint looked at this journey of your brain to your extremities as unidirectional. Unidirectional, one direction. The signal goes in this direction, just like light comes from the sun and goes out into the world. But that is because for a long amount of time, humans have not had an active endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system actually makes it possible for signals to go upstream, or for this to be a two-way street. So just so that you know very briefly, I won't go into the whole cultural, historical, fraught story about this, but cannabis is the foundation of humanity and human civilization, human culture. The country named China literally translates as land of hemp. It is one of the cradles of civilization. Over 5,000 years ago, the Chinese culture used hemp, which is the cannabis plant, as the basis of all that it did. The seeds were its food source and oil source. Plant had medicines, like essential oil exudations that were used as medicines, and that the entire structure of the plant was also used for fiber that was for building and for clothing. So the foundations of how you do civilization. And what you have in your body is something that is called the endocannabinoid system. Endo prefix meaning within. It is a naturally occurring circulatory system of cell membrane receptors that exists within your body. It's baked into who you are. So the use of the plant that is known as cannabis, aka hemp, is baked into human culture and the development of who and what the complexities you've been able to achieve as an organism or as a species in this world. And the body that you're in also has an innate characteristic that is to be molecularly receptive to these cannabinoid molecules that ordinarily are something that is available to you in your diet and something that your body produces itself. Humans in the 20th century have not had it available in their diet, have not been producing it themselves. You've not had a healthy neurological system. Definitely not since World War II, and again, not to get too much into the history of it, but just know that this plant was made illegal when it was at one point all pervasive, not only in China over 5,000 years ago, but even into the 1800s, the early times of the United States, which had just become a country. You used to be able to pay your taxes in hemp. They needed lots and lots of hemp to make the big giant sails for the Navy, those giant sailing vessels that had lots and lots of rope and lots of the billowing white sails to catch the wind. That's all made of hemp. So the United States was like, hemp farmers, grow extra hemp. You can literally pay us in bales of hemp. We'll take it. We'll use it for the Navy. All right, that is how pervasive that plant structure was in your culture. And when the plant was grown for its fiber, the farmers that had extra leaves would take those leaves and ferment it and turn it into silage, which is a type of animal feed supplement that then is eaten by cows and pigs and chickens. And that those organisms ingesting the fermented hemp leaves would have more cannabinoids in both their milk, eggs, and flesh. And then the humans who consumed the milk, eggs, and flesh would have access to more cannabinoids within their own body. When you have cannabinoids in your body, you don't just have a signal that goes from your brain to your extremity, like to your elbow. You also have the capacity to stop signals that are pain signals from going constantly. I'm not describing this very well, but basically that place where the two nerves come together and there has to be a chemical signal to jump across that gap. What the cannabinoids can do is be in that gap and prevent the signals from being constantly sent, to be able to say, hold down on those signals. We don't need quite so many signals. It mitigates and redirects signals in the body, specifically pain signals. So when humans now, who have been starved of cannabinoids throughout pretty much their whole entire life and their whole entire development for several generations, develop health issues, and then they gain access to either dietary cannabis or some form of a tincture or something like that that contains THC or CBD, a lot of people report immediately cessation of pain signals. And that's because that is how your body was meant to function. You were meant to have these positive cannabinoid signalers that stop the signal going from your elbow to your brain saying, ow, 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 there was something here, ow, 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 ow. The cannabis, it's not an opiate. It's not something that says, oh, just forget about this pain or make it go away or benumb it in some way. It literally changes the signaling so that instead of just brain to elbow, you also have elbow to brain. Creates a multidimensional human. Creates a multidimensional experience, a biofeedback loop. Again, it is a direct analogy to the sun and the stars. At a certain point, you got cut off from the sun and the stars. You didn't have that ease of communication from you, the experiencer, the sensory organ, back to the sun. And at a certain point in human development, cultural history, you got cut off from your own extremities, where signals went in one direction but then were not able to be mitigated going in the complementary direction. This is why these two things matter, and why the rectification of the entire economy structure in your world matters, to be able to make the cannabis available in your body. And I promote it mostly as a dietary, like as a food supplement, although I know it is looked at in various different ways in this world. Like, you can turn it into a medicine. It's topical, you can turn it into a tincture, you can take it, you can smoke it, all these different things, but it's supposed to be a part of your food supply. And when it is a part of your food supply, then it creates this balance in the neurological signaling within your body. And that is analogous to and concurrent with the reestablishment of your sensory connection to the sun and the stars, so that the sun and the stars know what is going on in real time. So let me, because I'm pulling up my notes now. So I need to talk about the sun and the sun's heliosphere, because you have this shape that is within and surrounding you that is your chakras. The earth has this, which is the earth's magnetosphere. But then the sun has this shape surrounding it. The sun has a big, giant, double torus shape surrounding the sun, and it's so big that all of the solar system planets are contained within it, and it is called the sun's heliosphere. And the heliosphere represents an energetic envelope within which the sun is powerful, and the sun protects and nourishes and claims as itself everything that's inside of the heliosphere. That's like the epidermis. Get it? The boundary of what the sun is. And it, again, protects the planets that it has created, upheld, and that it helps to develop life on those planets. So outside of the sun's heliosphere, then you have interstellar space, different levels of energy. And what the sun does in order to create this, again, this is a moving force field that is created out of these dynamic exudations that include not only optical light, but also frequencies, high energy particles, very, very tiny wavelength energy field emissions. That is the solar wind. The solar wind has a force that is constantly blowing outward or exuding outward using linear language, and has an envelope, an edge. And then, of course, there's also the complementary crushing inward gravity. But when suns and stars are healthy and alive, there's a balance, and that blowing outward and kind of generational gushing, Genesis, creation, gushing, moving outward, and then also energy fields circulating back in. These are dynamic biofeedback loops, all right? And also, so I haven't emphasized this enough in this particular teaching, but it's just a big part of everything that I share. The sun emanates consciousness. So everyone on Earth would agree, like, yes, the sun emanates the solar wind. You can even measure it with various different types of telescopes and apparatuses. but the sun emanates consciousness. So what I'm teaching you about is the sense of you're an emanation of the sun's consciousness, and you've come into your own being, you're your own individuated packet of sentience, and then also you are expected to, or you have an agreement with the sun to send back direct feedback on what you are experiencing in terms of consciousness. That your consciousness is directly connected to the consciousness of the sun. So I have to overtly state this because there's a lot in objective materialism which is not a healthy viewpoint that says the sun is just this dead, bright object in the sky. It's just a dead, stupid, big, bright ball of like gases and chemical reactions, and it's a nuclear furnace, and it's very hot, it's doing stuff, but it's not smart and alive. It's very, very much conscious, aware, sentient, alive, in the definition of everything that we consider to be alive, and then connected to you. And so training to think of the sun in a new way, and that the sun sends light, which is information and awareness and intelligence and organized data, away from itself, or let's say into the world. It sends information into the world, and then it also receives that information back in reflection, or being deflected, or in a slightly different vector, and is able to calculate what is going on in the world based upon the reflection and the receiving of that information. And the sun and the stars are sending out light to the entire galaxy. So this, again, is not just a small rapport that you have with one bandmate, you and the sun. That all of the stars are sending out information into the entirety of the galaxy, and that each star, of course, has its own, energy force field or its own boundaries, but there's a cumulative effect, and this is a very loose validation of the sense of astrology, and I always want to say astronomy. Astrology, the story of the stars at the moment you were born. So there's a lot that is, heavily acculturated and anthropomorphic projections in people looking at astrology. But the very basic validation and truth is that your life is influenced not only by the consciousness emanation of your nearest star, the sun, but by all of the stars that are musicians in a band of consciousness that are all acting upon each individual and each moment at different levels, at different degrees of intensity. All right. So there's truthfulness there. We are fed, nourished, upheld, and affected by all of the stars, which is also all light or all consciousness. And the sun is like our nearest, closest relative, but also, spoiler alert, it's really you. It's really you. So when you get past all of these genetic blockages, communication difficulties between yourself and the sun, and then many, many other systems of interpretation, like the blockages that come from different religious paradigms, religious, mythological, and cosmological paradigms, and the expectations of the story of reality. When you get past all of that, you get to this basic truth. You're the sun. It's you. That is you up there. I don't know if it's very sunny where you are today. For me, it's all clouds. But if you can see beyond the clouds, look up at the sun, be like, that's me, that's you. That's exactly right. So the process of clearing away stuff that is residual consciousness or out and out non-being from your own chakras, from the membrane of death, and being able to reestablish a direct communication rapport with the sun is literally you as a nerve or a nerve plexus reestablishing your capacity to send and receive signals to the great brain. Great brain. My elbow's now going to connect effectively to my brain. You are now going to connect effectively to the sun and the great brain that is in the sky. And so all of this is necessary for health and reestablishing levels of balance and well-being in the entire galaxy. Because again, in this difficult time that people are in right now, people might lose faith and they might say, does God exist? This world is very effed up. Does anybody even know? Cosmic Complaints Department, I'm shaking my fist. And the answer is the sun and the stars are all part of what is happening. There are imbalances in your body, in your life, in your planet, in your social dynamics, and there are imbalances in the entire galaxy. The great brain in the sky, actually the galaxy is really only one nerve plexus of a much, much larger, more extensive great brain in the sky, but I don't want to liquefy your brain right now. We'll just keep it on the level of one galaxy. There's problems everywhere. You got it? So that's kind of a different contextualization, because one contextualization says like this, which is kind of like the human cosmological perspective. Everything on Earth is a big giant pile of crapola. To be a human is the definition of being degraded. Everything in Earth is bad and poopy and crappy. But heaven is great. Heaven, the sky, heaven, the heavens, the world of pure light, the heavenly reality, your afterlife, the sunbark of Ra, whatever is your cosmology, wherever you go when you die, and everyone's like, oh, I can't wait to die and be in that nice, beautiful place where everything is great and out of the world of poop crapola, right? I'm joking. Please don't take me seriously, because I'm here to tell you that your world that you're inhabiting with your bodies on Earth and your physical presence is supposed to be a divine paradise, is supposed to be comfortable, is supposed to be fun, joyous, a learning experience, never bored. I think that's the part of your existential ennui, the thing that is most painful to you. The thing that's most painful to the ego is having to say you're wrong, but the other part that's most painful is just boredom. Having to do this all over again. It's not just that it's torture. It's not just that there's pain signals happening. It's like, it's repetitive pain. You're like, this is so boring. This repetitive pain is so boring. I've done it all before. Yeah. But you're not supposed to have to experience repetitive pain or boredom, which is its own form of psychological torture. You're supposed to be in an information-rich environment where you are constantly delighted by the new things that you're experiencing, the new things that you are learning, and again, where you are in a state of constant rapport between yourself and the source of pure light, the source of pure information, that which is emanating and sustaining this world. It's not supposed to be like, oh yes, like the creator like sprinkled creativity sprinkles into the world. Human life emerged. The creator kind of is like, oh yeah, some stuff is going on. I'm over here doing this. You guys work it out down there. Like, again, this is cosmology. This is cosmology of how a lot of humans look at the world as inherently flawed and also as an inherently disconnected, disaffected creator that's not here in the moment, like taking care of creation, but is instead like, oh, I was there at the Big Bang. I did the important stuff. You know, I sprinkled out consciousness on top of you, like you put something on top of your cereal in the morning, and like, you guys take care of it. And I'm like, okay, like that's not actually accurate, and it's definitely not how you need to look at the world. Because here's the updated view of looking at the world. You live in a world that where physicality, structure, and embodiment is meant to be a divine paradise, and also the world of the sun and the stars and pure light and the heavens is supposed to be a realm of perfect organization. Perfect organization. When I am talking about the red X's clipboard that you get when you get onto the membrane of death, that's because you need to be able to fit into the world of perfect information and organization. And all of these red X's are all the places where you are not going to fit into that world because you are not shaped right. So the loving clipboard person is not here like some mean teacher just trying to bring you down and telling you like, you know, you're wrong, but is instead really trying to give you the best information that you need so that you can fit in on the level of pure light, pure sentience, pure awareness, and just immediacy of reality generation. You have to be shaped right. You have to do your math right. And when you're able to master that and to be shaped correctly, then you fit in with the perfect orderliness of presence at that level. But what I'm talking to you about is to say that there are imbalances in your physicality structure and there are imbalances in the world of pure light. That the sun is, and all of the stars are doing this amazing dance of emanation and then listening. Being like, well, I just made some stuff happen. What am I hearing? Echolocation. I sent out something, waiting for the echo, and then not receiving it. So that non-reception of signal from you means there's imbalances up at that higher level. the genetic degradation and blockade that happened to humanity, the stuff that's stuck on the membrane of death, some of which might have had a soul or a consciousness at one point and is wayward on its journey, and some of which doesn't belong in existence anywhere at any time and never had a journey to begin with. All of that stuff is affecting the behavior and accuracy of the sun and the stars and the world of pure light. So that means, in a more accurate term, things are not okay all over. Not like that's a world of pure everything is okayness, and then you're in the world of deep crapola. Actually, you have problems and imbalances in both levels of the world. And that's really, really important. So you have a hugely engaged creator force or sentience, not the cosmic sprinkler who's just going to sprinkle and go. Creative engagement, care for the thing that is created, care for creation, desire to be engaged with directly and to help and fix directly all the things that are not correct. And all the real problem that you've had is a limitation of communication failure, and not efficient sharing of information. And that if you had that efficient and immediate, accurate sharing of information, that's how you can fix and heal all of these things that are imbalances on all of these different reality levels. That is one of the things that Flying Rainbow Lasagna makes it possible, to be able to bring together these formerly divergent realms, to be able to have communication between these formerly divergent realms. Princess Cheeky just got up from bed. Come here. Just we'll have a brief. We are just sometimes very serious in class because we're a little silly. As you can see, Cheeky right over here. Just give us a moment's break. Hug Cheeky. Princess Cheeky just decided to get up. Not time for anything yet, and we definitely did lots of exercise and things like that before class because I knew that she would be bored. Because I knew that it would be that type of a day. Okay, so thank you for letting me have a moment's hug with Cheeky. Now redirecting back on track and pulling up my notes to make sure that I'm getting to everything that's important. Wait, let's put this up. Scientific studies on your planet often ignored the endocannabinoid system, couldn't even presume that it was in existence because unhealthy people were studying unhealthy subjects. Let me drink coffee. You guys know what I'm talking about. So since World War II and cannabis not being in your body system, it made the cell signaling limited, and there was not effective communication across your whole entire body system. Scientists who don't have communication effectively across their entire body system looked at other subjects that didn't have effective communication across their body system and concluded that the body does not have an effective communication system. They ignored the endocannabinoid system because it was not healthy and it was not functional. And that was not functional because of cultural restrictions, not because of your biological format. Because of molecular and chemical taboos that were created in your world to diminish human consciousness, to diminish human health. So this is a cautionary tale about objective materialist science. You get what you expect. You perceive what you expect to perceive. The lack of perception of the human endocannabinoid system happened because of lack of expectation, and also because the system was either non-functional or completely dormant in humans. And then it's taken a long time to be able to gain traction. Only very recently, within the past 20 years, as I've been here as a Flying Rainbow Lasagna here, I've noticed the improvement, and that there's still an ongoing discussion of the validation of the human endocannabinoid system, until you finally get to the point where you recognize that this is an innate aspect of what you are, and something that is supposed to be at the foundation of your nutrition and the foundation of your civilization building activities. And in order to have the healthy functioning endocannabinoid system, you have to have the dietary building blocks to create the neurotransmitters that are part of this bidirectional signaling system in your nervous system, and that your brain is a direct analogy to the sun. Got it? So you haven't been connecting with the sun effectively, and the extremities in your own body system have not been connecting with your brain effectively. And that now there is time for a huge rectification on your planet with how you do diet, how you do society, what is allowed, what is taboo, healing and restructuring your own bodies, and then reestablishing your rapport with the sun and the stars so that the sun and the stars can know what's happening in your life as a direct real-time broadcast. And that's a biofeedback loop. So good. I got all of that. Oh, we got to talk about this. Quantum is not just a catchphrase. So there's a lot of things in the realm of seekers, people that are in this world now that are looking for spiritual attainment, quantum this and quantum that. I don't want to sound derogatory in any way. I love that people are trying to level up and learn about new stuff. But quantum really means that something is happening at the level of matter, that matter has been cut into such tiny pieces you can't even call it matter anymore. If you take a slice of cake and you slice it up into tiny, tiny, tiny pieces, it gets even smaller and smaller until you can't even technically call it cake anymore. That is what you have when you're looking at the world through the viewpoint of interpreting it, of what is quantum. That it's like particles that are so tiny that they verge on the definition of not being able to be called matter anymore. We should just say waveform presences. That you're no longer in a world where you are defined by hard-edged objects or even billiard balls or even tiny little billiard balls called atoms, but what you are really doing is interpreting the world as a series of waveform presences. I, Aurora, am a waveform presence. And when I'm like, I get so comfortable, I'm like, can we just all be waveform presences? Like, I'm so comfortable just being a waveform presence. But no, we must also we have to do reality at the larger, macroscopic level too. The flying rainbow lasagna is a way of bridging the gap between what happens at the subatomic or purely waveform level and what happens at the macroscopic or anthropomorphic level. That's big. I don't talk about that one enough. I talk about this as being a bridge between formerly divergent realms, like point A to point B. You can imagine that bridging together linear time spaces that would have been far apart otherwise, but this can also bridge scale. Things that are tiny, 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 and things that are biggity, big, 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 big. That is, in a lot of ways, what flying rainbow lasagna is and what it does. Now, in what I talked about 10 years ago, I talked about quantum entanglement and what photons are doing and how photons have a twin. I'm about to record something for Path of Light that is a completely different way of looking at what a photon is. And I want to just give you that instead of giving you the outdated stuff that I wrote 10 years ago. So here's the newfangled stuff that I haven't even written yet. And now that I'm sharing it with you, I'm going to have to find a way to organize it and then diagram it, because that's always my challenge. Okay, so if this yellow dot over here is a photon, which again, it's even hard to represent a photon as a packet of light because it has this whole entire waveform ocean of everything that it's connected to, and you can't really even cut up a giant ocean into one tiny little piece and say that's a piece of the ocean. But we do this, humans do this just in order to be able to kind of get a handle on things and comprehend them in some way. But this packet of light over here actually contains the entire story of light. And that is directly analogous to one of these blue moments here when you hit the membrane of death, and that contains the entire story of a person's journey coming up here until they get to that moment. So when you look at this one little quote unquote packet of light, one little tiny photon, I'm going to try to draw this for you. What you're really looking at is, imagine this is a spiral that goes all the way back inside of it, even to the origins of light itself. And that every single photon that is in existence contains that whole entire story. Every single photon that is in existence contains that whole entire story going back, or you could look at it as an emergence, like here's the source, and then here's the magic of perspective, something coming forward, and then here is the photon in front of you, and it has come on this very long, let's get a purple color, this very, very long spiral journey in order to be able to get to this moment now. And then of course it's going to keep going and going and going and going and going on its journey as that photon continues to do stuff and interact. It's going to keep on going. Okay, you can hear someone is squeaking and barking. Hold on one moment. I'm going to get some food bribes for someone who's squeaking. Hold on a second. So that is the new and updated model of how I'm trying to share the truth of what a photon is with humanity. But as it relates to my notes that are my class notes that I send out and have as part of the email and the PDF, and what I'm talking about there, I'm talking about the sun being able to do a complex calculation between what was sent out and then what the photon has gone through and then what the photon receives back. So it can be perceived as a numeric comparison of energy levels, but also as a behavioral and consciousness and emotional energy level comparison. Think of it as you contrasted with the version of you that never left the source. This is big, and that never actually went on the journey of traveling through time. So I'm kind of bridging a little bit. That's the sense of what quantum entanglement is, that every time a photon is born, that there's two. So wait. First, because now I'm going to teach you the stuff like, don't pay attention to this, but this is what I'm going to teach you. That this is the old way of looking at things, is quantum entanglement. That when, first of all, the sun is a portal, not merely a series of chemical reactions. The portal is like a doorway through which photons are born. They come from someplace through the sun and then into this reality, but that's not the end of their journey, and that when they are born or when they emerge, that there is a twin. One of the photons goes on its journey, one of the twins stays home at the source, and then the sun is able to do a real-time comparison between the guy that stayed home and the guy that went someplace, and what this guy is experiencing, and the energy and information that this guy is gathering out here. But all of that is a 10 years ago way for me to be able to share this with you. And now what I teach about in Path of Light is the sense that not that there's two photons, that there's quantum entanglement. I don't have to do any kind of like accommodation of human viewpoints. And I can just say everything is at the source and everything stayed there and everything never left. I'm laughing. Everything is there. You're there. You're there right now. You actually never left. You're like, I'm there right now, but I'm here, and you're there, and you're walking on a treadmill. I am here, and you're there, and you're individuated, and I'm individuated, but at the same time, with no distortion or limitation, we are both at the source. This is why the stuff that I taught about 10 years ago was appropriate for that level of capacitation, what you could think about, what you could know back then, in contrast with what you can think about and what you can know now, because what you're doing now is changing your cognitive structure to be able to encompass more light, move at a faster rate, and recognize that you're at the source right now. And for those of you who are filled with boredom and ennui at the karmic washing machine and not wanting to do another time loop and another this and another this and another that, this is how you get directly to the destination, the cognitive, the aha moment. Your destination as an aha moment of a light switch turns on inside and you recognize I'm actually at the source. I'm actually at singularity. I'm actually there experiencing this. And that is the cognitive event when you recognize you're actually at light speed. So everything up until this point, including 10 years ago and all the things that I've been teaching you and everything in your life that you've been experiencing, has been a careful creation by the chef de cuisine of reality, giving you exactly the right cognitive morsels that you need to eat in each moment in order to get more and more and more light, be moving faster and faster and faster, and at a certain point have that realization or that recognition moment of I'm at the source, I'm at light speed. And that's what the God moment, the I am God moment is That is what the moment of ascension is. We're going to talk about planetary ascension. This is how it relates to the stuff that I was talking about in part 2 of this. Okay, so I know I'm jumping around a little bit. Okay. I got this. The sun is sending out a spherical ball of light energy as feelers, even though I model that differently in Path of Light. The return or re-experiencing of the sun's emanations are what allows it to develop a picture, an accurate assessment of what is actually going on. And this is all consciousness. Me and my dog eating her little snack, and you guys and your little dog and microbes everywhere, consciousness in general, are the pulses that are a part of the sun's exploration of reality. Like when you turn on the light switch in your room and light floods out and you can see what's going on in your room, that is what the sun and the stars are doing with us as life. The sun and the stars have created reality structures in terms of time structures, and then we are like the light feelers, where we are able to say to the sun's sensory experience, this is what we're doing, this is what we are experiencing. So we are that neural activity that emanated from the sun, or that story structure, narrative structure that is emitted from the sun, and then returning home those catalogs of experience to the sun. That's pretty big, because you could think of the sun as being like, okay, I'm going to write a narrative structure. Here's a timeline. Timeline is an abstraction, like thing 1 plus thing 23 plus thing 304 equals this. And then you actually experience that timeline. That is what this structure is. It's really a series of mathematical abstractions that you know as your life. But your life is more than just a series of mathematical abstractions. You have things that are pleasure, pain, concern, worry, lightheartedness, freedom, joy. There's all these different things that are very, very different than just the mathematical abstraction. And what you're doing is sending back that experience, the analog experience of the realm of pure potential, the timeline that is sent out from the sun and the stars of pure potential of what you can experience. And the sun needs to hear that and feel that. The broadcast of your sensations and realizations of the analog physical world back to the sun. And I already talked about how that is done in a type of translation into something that is a non-analog experience. Think of it as like a non-linguistic or a perfectly translated, non-distorted way of transmitting information. That is representation. So it's similar to how concepts can be translated into like a binary code or a series of impulses. Just know that what you're talking about is the most accurate way that you can translate or transmit some sensory information that came out of the analog experience of being actually in life. So this has to do with death, your death journey, and how that impacts your daily experience of life. And this also absolutely relates to planetary ascension. So we are the sun here exploring itself and interacting with itself, and that is true of all these different organisms. All of these organisms, like you, a cat, a blade of grass, these are all the sun interacting with itself and then interacting with the sun. And knowing that when you are embodied helps life to become much more interesting and gratifying. And it's more exciting when you can receive in real time what other parts of yourself are doing. So that's the ultimate of what we're supposed to experience and what's been blockaded from us for the past 3 years or so due to the synthetic telepathy. We're supposed to be able to be like standing on a bunch of grass and looking at a cat. And we receive the information. We're sending to the sun the information, like I am standing here, and these are what my toes are feeling touching the grass, and these are what my eyes are feeling looking at this cat. But we're also feeling at the same time from the sun, what is the grass feeling? What is the cat feeling? And then it becomes a much more varied, multi-sensory, dynamic, exciting level of being. As opposed to when they turned on the millimeter wave, I noticed this. I noticed hawks in my area where I live, like these red-tailed hawks. They were trying to hunt a concrete garden ornament that looked like a bunny. I'm like, the hawk could not tell that it was just a piece of concrete. So, like, look, if you guys don't know, in nature, everything is supposed to be telepathic. Like, the hawk is already supposed to be able to sense and speak to the bunny before it swoops down with its talons and goes like, chomp, 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 I'm going to eat you. It's able to talk to it and sense from it. And that the hawk was not able to sense from it at all. I've seen many examples of this, which is how I'm able to say in a very, rational way, I can sense my human mind and other human minds have been limited by the technological interference waves that have been established here, making it much more difficult to be telepathic with other organisms and life forms, and more difficult to be telepathic with the sun. But now I can also see that other organisms and life forms that are supposed to be able to be telepathic with each other, they're being affected by these millimeter waves as well. So humans, folly, and whatever evil stuff, evil in air quotes, is acting through humans. It's bad stuff, because you have a whole entire Starlink satellite system that's just, it's not just, you're not just humans in cities affecting each other. You're humans or some unsavory force that is acting through humans, affecting your whole entire planet, including hawks and bunnies and all of these organisms that now are not being able to have their real-time communication with each other or with the sun and the stars. That's a real difficulty. Yes, and just handing in the book of your life, like your hard drive of everything you've experienced at the end of your life, to the sun and the stars, is not as helpful to the sun and the stars, who are virtuous virtuosos, who have as their reason for being making and perfecting a divine experience, a divine reality structure, that their life becomes more difficult because there's not the sense of the real-time sharing, all right? So that's the imbalance is happening at the higher level. So now I'm on to part 2, planetary ascension, that you are personally involved in a biofeedback loop with the sun, involving food, chlorophyll, and your intestines as a refinery for energy. And there exists in a non-natural state these lower vibrational thought entities who wish to feed off of the food that is a lower vibration than love. So we've talked about these, the Prutis, for quite a long amount of time. And love being defined as the equitable energy exchange between two or more beings. So why these Prutis, what we would say that they want to exist eating something that's not quite love. In some ways you want to interpret that, I'm kind of projecting upon you. In some ways you want to interpret that as saying like, oh, you mean like sadness and grief and sorrow and everything that's not pure unconditional love. I'm like, yes, but and also that what they really want to do is they want to have an exploitive relationship with you. So it's not just the quality of the emotional energy that they desire and require, like anger and rage and grief. Those are definitely non-love vibrations that they like to eat. They're like, yum, give that to me. And so humans have coined this type of vernacular, calling it loosh. But I'm talking about something that is on an even more abstract level. Love and the love tone itself is created when the equal exchange of anything is exemplified. And when there is a relationship of exploitation, unidirectional, where one organism is gaining something at the expense of the other organism, and that's it. Like one person receives, the other person does not receive. That is the antithesis of love, or the non-expression of love. So again, the non-love in this circumstance is not just like a sadness or a grief or something like that, but it's the sense that they're getting stuff from you, but you're not getting stuff from them. Do you get it? You've got something that lives inside of you that's taking energy from you. It's getting stuff and you're not getting stuff from it. That is out of balance. That is the antithesis of love. So I, am very, very aware of this and rebalancing this in many, many different relationships in my life and in my biology in this body. Like, so I'm drinking this wonderful pomegranate juice. Pomegranate is great for your mitochondria. I'm in love with my mitochondria. I give to them and they give to me. You get it? It's equal. We help each other. We help each other out. We got a great relationship. That's how you want to start to look at these things. Because mitochondria are ancient biological, not hijackers, but let's say like couch surfers. Visitors who came to stay and never left. But they give to you. They give to you. You give them a house to live in your cells, and they give to you in the sense of transforming food into energy. And so that is a good deal. That's mutualism. That's not just someone living in your house. They pay rent. They actually help you to do the dishes. They help you to mow the lawn. Mitochondria are your friend. Totally, totally different than some level of organism parasite. Like if you have a parasite in your intestines, the parasite is like, let me eat your food. You don't get to eat your food. I eat your food and I give nothing back to you. That's not love. That is definitely not something that you want inside of you. Or an energy parasite. And an energy parasite would be defined as some kind of a thought form or a presence or a relationship with some type of whatever perceived entity or deity where it's getting stuff from you, but you're not getting stuff from it. It's basically out of balance relationships. So everything about Ascension is creating, establishing, and reassessing healthy, energetic boundaries. On an abstract level, what you're having to do is go away from the areas within this sculpture that you're not and towards the areas that you are. So that's saying like, I'm not that characteristic, I'm not that series of wrong iterations, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. But also establishing energy boundaries to say, I am not the residues on the membrane of death. And what do you do if the stuff is already inside? Go back to my original joke at the beginning of this class. That's kind of not that funny of a joke, but the killer's in your house. The killer's in your house. Killer's in your house. What are you gonna do? Because that's what some of these parasitic consciousnesses do. When you start to do like an inner scan, and I do this a lot, like in my own body and in my own energy field, like you kind of like scan yourself with the microscope of your own being. And you're like, oh, that's there, and that's there, and that's there. Like, what is that doing there? And sometimes you find a thing where you're like, what is that doing there? You're like, you're not supposed to be here. You're a parasite. You don't give to me at all. And then sometimes it'll be like, I'm in your house. The killer's in your house. What are you gonna do? And then the answer is, you must exert a healthy boundary that can look like some kind of an encapsulation. Like, this is me, right? And there's something inside of there that's not me. You put a membrane around it, like, that's not me. It might be, technically it is within the larger umbrella of the definition of me, but that is not me. Big stuff as it relates to your psychology, your mental presence, your cognitive abilities. These guys on the membrane of death, they don't just sit there being quiet. Sometimes we've called them in class the peanut gallery. They don't just sit there. If they just sat there not doing anything, they'd be like, shh, don't tell anybody. Parasite. Don't tell anybody. If only they were silent parasites. They're not. And you have to wonder why not. Because a parasite that was really effective would be like, no one knows I'm here. It's just me like, I'm a parasite. Like, no one knows I'm here. I'm totally silent. I'm totally invisible. I'm going to keep on feeding off of everyone forever. If you tell everyone like, I'm a parasite, then you're like, that's a parasite. Get rid of it now. And this parasite is kind of like wanting you to know that it's there, because the parasite will do all sorts of things in the pooties in terms of destabilizing you. It will implant thoughts and implant negative emotions, making a negative energetic investment in order to get back more than it put in. So that's like saying, if the bicycle wheels are moving at a certain speed and this parasite puts in 1 unit of energy, makes an energy investment of 1 unit, then it's able to destabilize the chakras to release 9 units of energy. Like that, you guys know this. And this is literally economy of hell stuff, and it's also the stock market. What do? Buy low, sell high. This is how you make money in the stock market. So you invest a certain amount of money, $1, $100, and then what do you get back? An increased amount. You get back $2 or $500, and that's how you get money. So these guys literally invented the stock market. They invented economy. They mirrored and created all of these outgrowths in human behavioralism of what they're doing energetically inside of us. So you have different things that you can do. And again, the teachings from 10 years ago, they might no longer be effective, but just know that there was a time when what I would do was simply not respond and not release energy. If a negative entity inside of me made an investment in trying to harvest some sadness, grief, sorrow, or trauma, or whatever, I would just be like, oh, look at that. Like, you just put $1 worth of energy into me, hoping to destabilize my chakras. I'll not destabilize, and I'll yoink your energy. And I yoinked a bunch of energy. This is like from a long time ago. And I used to do a lot of yoinkage and then have a slush fund. Like, yep, this is all the energy that these, negative thought parasite type things tried to put inside of me in order to destabilize me. And I remained stable instead. I did not go into tailspins of self-doubt, insecurity, fear, long word battles in my mind, and simply kept that energy as something that I could use and deploy at another time. But I feel like that's a band-aid. So that's why I don't really want you to be doing that much. Just know that you can do that, but that's not really an effective response, because the most effective response is, let's find out and really talk about, why are these things stuck on the membrane of death? There is a giant flowing membrane that, when you reach the membrane of death, washes you away and dissolves everything that's not truthful and not totally in divine alignment about you, and you start at the beginning. How come these other guys are not getting washed away? And how come not only are they not washed away, but somehow they're able to set up shop? They're able to create an entire empire. They're able to somehow influence human behavior. They're somehow able to influence human dynamics and human culture and think that they own you and that they farm you. None of this is acceptable. So instead of doing the cosmic slush fund thing and working on these very, like I said, band-aid is one way of thinking about it, but just let's say it is a stimulus response at the lowest level. That can be moderately empowering, but does not actually get to the root of the existence of what you need to address. And what you really need to address is these things need to either go to entropy, which is a state of total non-being and stillness, or if they contain a level of consciousness, even if it's like a tiny micron of consciousness, it needs to go back to the great central sun for recycling, because it is way off its path. One of those two things. So that's what I would suggest for you to do now at this point in the journey, because it's not just 10 years that we've been doing this. It's 10 million, miles of soul journey. You've been on an incredibly long soul journey within 10 chronological years. So the things that were appropriate way back down the road, and you're like, oh, I'll try this, and I'll try this, and I'll try that, and I'll try that. That's fine for back then. But now you have to have grown, evolved, and upgraded in your response to what this is. And the two things, something that might be a very, very wayward spark and something that is total non-being, like they have an interrelationship and interactivity, and they're both related to technology. So all of these things need to be addressed in order for you to actually be free and to be in total alignment. And addressing these iniquities and putting yourself back into freedom and total alignment also means a recalibration of the entire system, and that's what is needed to be returning to being a light eater. And I knew that in coming here 22 years ago. When I first came here, I joked with you about how I just thought I could be a light eater, and I didn't really know the inner workings of this body or of the energetic dynamic and the context that I found myself within. And that it took a couple of weeks of like a steep learning curve to kind of learn, like, this is how people do it here, and this is where the food is located, and that this is necessary to sustain your body. Because in order to become a light eater, you have to not only recalibrate your body, you have to change your whole entire system. You have to change everything. Everybody's got genetic blockages. Everybody's got putis on their inner membranes of death. This is really, really, really big. When I draw this diagram for you, this is supposed to be 100% you. Let me rewind a couple of things so you don't get too confused here. Every single one of these blue dots, there we go, is supposed to be you. The membrane of death is literally created or comprised of all of these versions of you. So it's not like, oh, there's this waterfall of impersonal energy and it's just flowing and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's you. Because just in exactly the same way that you are the sun and that there is only you flowing into yourself, within your whole entire chakra shape, this membrane over here, which has been occupied by these very, very malevolent, dark, demonic, like whatever descriptive terms we want to use for them, entities or fragments or residual consciousnesses or non-beings, that stuff isn't you. That's why I don't want you to scratch your eyes out and say, get out, you're not supposed to be in me. I want you to exert your energetic boundaries, because the killer's in your house. And he's going to say, what are you going to do? I'm in your house. And the answer is you have to exert energetic boundaries and say, you don't belong in here at all. The only stuff that belongs in here are the aspects of my own self that have been exploring the time possibilities that the sun has given to me, and explored them in a slightly incorrect way that made me end in a mortality event that did not have the coherence and longevity that the true timeline that the sun is writing for all of us gives to us. So please know there is a correct math homework here. And in the correct math homework, it is a story, like a narrative structure, and it is also a series of timelines and possibilities and probabilities. That's the one timeline, the story that the sun and the stars are writing. That is the one where you don't die and everything is perfected in the world. So it's not just your individual life calculations that must be correct. Everything has to be correct on that timeline. In order for you to return to being a light eater and not go to the food room, buy apples with magical pieces of paper, everything has to do its math homework correctly. So this is a big, and I'll get to the end of my notes and I'll open the floor to questions, but all of the flowing membranes within your chakras should be 100% you. No invaders, nothing that's not supposed to be there. So not only have the invaders been having an exploitative relationship with you and somehow sustaining themselves there, they're not even supposed to be there. They're the ultimate of energy out of place, and I call that EOP. Energy out of place. E-O-O-P. EOP. Energy out of place. They're not where they're supposed to be. They are not supposed to be within your chakras. And so that this relationship is exploitative, and it becomes the ultimate in what humans would call enabling. Enabling something to continue and to be in existence that shouldn't be in existence at all, not even for 1 minute, definitely not for hundreds or thousands or millions of years. Time to restructure the entirety of reality. And I bring this up also so that you know, like I had to learn, like, oh, like in order for me to be a light eater here, we're going to have to restructure a lot of stuff. You're going to have to restructure a lot of stuff. Because a lot of people are like, that's it, like I'm done. Like I'm bored with potatoes and avocados. I've eaten enough of all of this. I'm ready to be a light eater. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Got to rearrange reality. Like you don't just do it as the convenience of I'm bored or I want to save on my grocery bills. And it's also not done as simply an individual event, because now you're starting to see how if you don't send back feedback to the sun doesn't know it needs to update its music. And look at all, let's say you're going to be strict in cosmic law and be like, I do me, you do you. I'm going to connect with the sun, with the sun and send back positive feedback, and the sun's going to know what's going on in my life. But all you losers, like the sun's not going to find out about what you're experiencing in life until you die. And then it finds out belatedly. That's really not going to work, because the sun is really, imagine on your eye, on your retinas of your eye, if you only had one cell that was firing, and then the rest of the cells you didn't find out about what they were looking at until 40 years later when they actually died, you wouldn't really have clear vision at all. So if you follow cosmic law and say, I'm just going to do me and you do you, and I can connect to the sun, but you guys are all going to have mortal events, and then the sun will find out belatedly, you're not going to be a light eater, because there's not enough truthfulness being beamed back to the sun. So now you're really starting to recognize this is the teaching that's appropriate for this moment on your journey, that not 10 years ago, you need to do a giant system-wide upgrade, not just an individuated upgrade. But this also is appropriate because what you're approaching as you're getting to that, the peak of that asymptotic curve is unity consciousness. In this structure and in that simplified time diagram that I'm always drawing for you, as you're getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to that level of alignment, you're getting closer and closer and closer to the truth that the truthful recognition that you are consciousness. All consciousness is you. That is unity consciousness. You are the sun, you are the stars, you are all light, you are the photon that contains the story of all photons everywhere, inside of every single photon. You are all light everywhere, you are that. So you've traveled millions of miles on your soul journey within the past 10 chronological years to get to the point of recognizing that you are everything. And then there is not this easy way to make a distinction and to say, well, I'll do what's right for me and I'll be responsible to me, but you do what's right for you. That at best is the way that we approach things coming out of the world of individuation. But really what you have to do now is to recognize that there is being and non-being. That's really the only distinction that you can make. There's stuff that should exist and stuff that doesn't exist. There's stuff that gets to infinity and infinite levels of vastness, information, heat, and motion, and then there's everything else. And the everything else stuff is either stuff that needs to go directly to entropy because it never existed. So yeah, we can jokingly just say kaput. It just goes kaput. And then other stuff would be considered a tiny spark of something that was once truthful with many, 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 many multiple layers of huge, huge, huge distortion on it. Once you get rid of, pare away and carve away all of that huge distortion, like again, you have a tiny micron of consciousness that's kind of like, oops, my mistake. I did a lot of things wrong. I have to go and do this all completely in a different way. And that also, I talk about that sometimes too. With some of these microns of consciousness, I would even say this, and this might sound radical, but you create a debt. When you incur a debt of suffering, sometimes the debt is so big of the stuff that you've done wrong that it's not enough to just be like, oh, well, just destroyed lives, killed this many people, caused this amount of suffering. Like if you could quantify suffering and you said that you made like whatever, 10 million billion units of suffering, like what if they don't make 10 million billion units of rectification juice or like jet fuel to be able to fly you back to the great galactic center, or forgiveness juice? Maybe if you've done 10 million billion units, you're so deep in debt and you're so in the hole that there's nothing you can do in order to be able to get back to light speed. That's a very real possibility, and I think that needs to be spoken about, not merely in the lighthearted ways that I've been talking about it, but in a very real sense of ethics and moral philosophy. If a consciousness is so far off its path and it becomes so much of what we would call evil, so distorted and so malevolent in its destructiveness and in its poor intentions, maybe even trying to destroy all life everywhere, the fabric of space-time reality itself, destroying all existence everywhere. What if you've not just attacked one person with a weapon, but what if you've attacked the entirety of God, the entirety of life, the entirety of time, the fabric of time-space itself? That's a big debt. And maybe they don't make enough, again, joking, I'm sorry juice or forgiveness juice for that. Maybe they don't make 10 billion units of rectification juice for that. In fact, maybe at a certain point, if you dig yourself that deep in the hole, you know you're not getting out. And that some consciousness, I must admit, I am not self-destructive, but I must allow for the possibility that some microns of consciousness might be self-destructive and might do that as their journey of being the massive screw-ups of the cosmos, screwing themselves up so badly that they can essentially never return to light speed and to consciousness and knowingness and sentience. For them, entropy is a mercy that takes them out of this indeterminate state of being stuck on the membrane of death or energy out of place, screwing everything up for everyone else, and brings them to a restful state of peace. That is what entropy is. So this shape represents these divergent places coming together and the empowerment and freedom that happens from bringing together formerly divergent realms. But it also represents the state of peace that is achieved when stuff or energy out of place that doesn't have a hope for being able to return to its former presence has a place to go. And that's big because maybe there's some debts that are just so, again, a hole that's so deep, it's infinitely deep, that there isn't enough energy to be able to get that thing, leverage that thing out of energy. Now, some troublemakers might be like, but Aurora, there's an infinite amount of energy, it's infinitely growing, blah, blah, blah. But here's the truth. You have an infinite budget, but you can't just spend it on anything. You have an infinite budget because you spend it wisely on the right things that it's supposed to be. That's called energy in place. That would be EIP. Got it? Energy in place. EIP. I know, these are very funny words to me. But yeah, you have an infinite amount of energy because you spend it well, not because you piss it away in the wrong directions. And so yeah, if some guy's dug himself an infinite hole, and then he's like, well, technically you've got an infinite amount of energy, dig me out of the hole. Be like, actually, I want to spend my infinite amount of energy on a completely different energy pattern than digging you out of this hole. And that's how I will continue to have an infinite amount of energy, not by spending it in this way that will then cause the dissolution of the fabric of time, space, and consciousness. So all of that being said, because this is very real, like the war that is fought is a very real war of the embodiment of the truth of cosmic law. This is what's going on with cosmic law, that when you do the flying rainbow lasagna, as you are an embodiment of this, part of what you're doing is sending to entropy the stuff inside of you that really doesn't have a chance, that really doesn't have a hope to be able to get to the energy state. And instead of causing continued suffering inside of you or in the time space itself or the time field itself, it has a resolution. That this represents not endless struggle, not endless war, not endless cosmic cleanup, but a resolution. And that when things are resolved and you're in that peaceful state, that's even when things start to get to be really fun. That is when you start to get to the real levels of creativity, because I hope that it's pretty obvious, like you haven't had these real levels of freedom and creativity in your life as embodied and individuated humans and souls in this world, but also not as sun and stars and pure light. There's been limitations and imbalances in all these places. Time to get back to the fun stuff, time to rectify all these things. So wait, I'm gonna go through my notes and make sure that I did the important stuff, how you get through the wormhole, having a lean ego. None of this is fat shaming. I love people of all sizes, of all body sizes. What I'm talking about is what you identify with as yourself. That you go through a solar portal, and this is how experts do star travel. We are going through a solar portal right now. This is very relevant to your life. When you go through a solar portal, you must travel light. You cannot take baggage. And the baggage is stuff that is not eternal and stuff that you don't identify with across lifetimes. But you're going to say, and I can sense this in you, well, I don't identify with my trauma, but it caused me to grow, and I identify with the growth and the heroicism that I evidenced from that. I agree. I agree completely. Your growth, evolution, and heroicism in response to trauma is part of your light. It is eternal, it is indelible, it is woven into you, and there's no way that it can be taken away from you. But the stuff that is the baggage that you don't bring with you when you travel light is any of the sense of loss and grief and sadness at the trauma that you have experienced. So you remember the event or events. You remember the negative event or events that you experienced, and you also remember and are defined by your response to those events. But when you go through the solar portal, it's not like getting an amnesia mind wipe, which is, I think, again, what people here are afraid of and what you tend to calibrate towards. It doesn't magically erase everything bad that's ever happened to you in your life, but it is the sadness, grief, loss, the traumatic reverberations of negative emotions does not come with you, even as you can still remember and acknowledge the very real suffering that you experienced. Because this also speaks to suffering was pretty much created with the invention of death and the occupying of the membranes of death of stuff that's not supposed to be there. And when you get rid of that stuff that's not supposed to be there, you totally take away the source of suffering, and you will not have suffering anymore. You will experience life in a very, very different way, and that's what you were experiencing before you got into this world of suffering. But who have you been in this world of suffering? Do you disappear? Because you know what? I think you're all amazing people. I think that in spite of the bad SHIT that you've been exposed to and bad things that have happened to you, I think that you have become amazing people, and I think that you've been refined, and you've gotten stronger and more you have greater integrity, and you've learned and grown in spite of very, very horrific sufferings and challenges and abuses and starvations. And you get to be your greatness again, but it doesn't mean that who you were during the bad stuff or during the deprivations, that person is erased. Because literally, like, when you have been in this world and when there's suffering and you respond to that suffering and you say, I need to do something, like, that's something that should be an eternal part of you. The courage and goodness that you earned by wanting to respond to the world of suffering. And when you experienced suffering and something was going bad in your life and you're like, this isn't going to stop me, I'm going to do it anyway, I'm going to find a way to fix things, I'm going to find a way to get healed or to help others in this moment, that also is defining of who you are. So the trauma and suffering and deprivation doesn't define you. Your response to it is what defines you. Those things don't exist in order to make you a better person, but in spite of it all, you have become a better person, or you've grown on a soul level. And now we're going through this solar portal, and you're not going to bring a lot of baggage with you about all the bad things that have happened. However, you are going to bring your light with you. You are going to remember or have eternally with you in the record of your being. Like I'm talking to you about that photon that contains the entire story of all light up into that moment. And you contain the entire story of everything you've been through up into that moment. You get it? If I read you like a book, I also read the stuff that you experienced during this era of great suffering and great deprivation, and who you were and how you responded. And many of you helped others. This is why I say you're amazing people, because many of you really helped others, were heroic, didn't give up, did things that would be considered impossible, and made your situation incrementally better. Instead of ignoring it, giving up, self-destructing, pretending it away, or any of the other responses that would be considered to be, less heroic. And that good stuff should come with you and should be part of the eternal nature of what you are defined as. And again, this is big cosmological stuff, because this has to do with, like, well, will this level of reality proof out of existence? Like, let's say you will exit this level of reality, and that which sustained this level of reality in the exploitation of energy, and energy out of place won't be able to sustain it any longer. You'll still exist. You'll exist in a redefined reality with accurate memories of what you experienced, and with an accurate identity or record of self of the things that you experienced during that time. And again, one of the big things that I'm trying to emphasize, and then I'll get to questions and comments, is the loving care of the sun and the stars. You're not abandoned, and the sun and the stars are not distant from their creation or uncaring about you at all. There have been huge communication difficulties, so please internalize or calibrate to that as your truthful expectation, that there have been huge communication difficulties and limitations in terms of the immediacy of a response in time. And then things will be fixed and healed, largely due to reestablishing better immediacies of communication, for you to receive information instantaneously and be able to send information instantaneously, and having nothing siphoning energy off of you, no loss of information, no friction. These things are going to redefine the flow of energy back towards what it's actually supposed to be, and then you'll see why these things, why there was suffering, why there were imbalances, why the energy didn't flow in the way that it was supposed to flow, and why things are different now. You will move into it will make sense to you, is what I'm trying to say. It will make sense to you. Let me get through the rest of my notes. I got to the sense of you're honing yourself to your leanest level of what your ego is, and this also relates to physical body fats. So the stuff that's on the membrane of death, that's these undigested emotional presences. I mean, you can say that they're sufferers too, but I don't want you to go too much into pity for them. But you can say that some of those microns of consciousness that have gone way off their path, they are sufferers too, and that they are also like the undigested blockages of the arteries or digestive tract of an unhealthy body. So once you clear, so that's like the coronary blockage on the membrane of death of the flow of time. Time is a living animal, and those undigested processes and emotions of something that is suffering, that's what's on the membrane of death. So in your own body, you get healthier when you process stuck emotions of trauma. And that includes, like, you can be a slender person, but you can have stuck fat deposits that are like clogging up the arteries of the body, or clogging up the bile duct or something like that. And it's literally because there are emotions, bad things that happen to you that you didn't get a chance to process. So again, the whole entire overarching galaxy has had bad and sad stuff happen to it. And then it is necessary to process those emotions and to be able to clear that energy from the membranes of death so that the entirety of time can flow in an unimpeded way. And that is analogous to the things that you do in your own body. So what are the things that help in your own body? Pilgrimages. Like, this is why people go, they do huge cardio. So pilgrimages meant like usually walking over many, many hundreds of miles, usually over the course of weeks or months. And it's a transformation. People still do pilgrimages, like if you might make a pilgrimage to a particular place, like to India, and walk from shrine to shrine, and you change and you learn and you grow, and part of it is who you meet along the way, but a big part of it is cardio. Because people who just aren't even on a spiritual journey, but they're just doing a ton of cardio and training for like a marathon, they go into deep levels of fat that is stored in the body and release it through the cardio. And that is very, very effective. So not everybody can do that. I recognize that joints and musculoskeletal abilities is not the same for everybody. If you can walk a huge amount, or if you can run a huge amount, or bicycle a huge amount, you definitely find the emotional landscape is redefined, as you might have stored some fat that is deep within your liver or something like that. And then you're on your bicycle or you're walking and you're doing these many, many miles, and you actually burn off that fat that might have been stored up, whatever, in 1987. And now those emotional experiences are released. So the idea is not that you have no fat stored in your body, but that you're constantly turning things over, that you're constantly going into deep storage. Like in your home, you might have your refrigerator and your freezer. You might store something in your freezer for whatever, a couple of months, but you don't want it to be there for like 20 years. If there's something that's in the permafrost, you know what I mean? Like your freezer gets totally frozen, you have to kind of like ship it away, and you get it out. Like, this is like a pot roast that is stored there from 20 years ago. Like, it's not good food, you need to get it out of there. And the same thing in your body. Like, if you have emotional traumas that are not resolved from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, birth trauma, ancestral trauma, all of this deep stuff, then it essentially acts as blockages, and that the cardio helps to release that. If you're not able to do a lot of heavy exercise, another thing that really works is fasting or intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting can be really positive. You can stop your main meal of the day at 5 p.m. and then just wait until 9 a.m. in order to eat again your breakfast the next day. And that's not too much deprivation, and most people are able to do that, and even doing that a couple of times a week brings the body into a state that is known as autophagy or autophagy, which is self-cleaning, where your body cleans stuff up and you go into the deep reserves and you go into your freezer and you're like, this pot roast is from 20 years ago, get it out of here. And that is how you clear out emotional debris from your own body. So the big commonality of what I'm sharing with you here today is clearing the membranes, clearing the interstices, clearing your own emotional debris. When you do that, you make way for ascension. That is what ascension is. And again, I bring you back to, I made such a funny face because I'm so passionate about this. My experiences as Aurora in the ancient or concurrent world of ascending there, it was inevitable. Everybody ascended there. It was inevitable. And it was a unfoldment of the path of your soul's growth to be able to reach that level of attainment. And although death existed peripherally as an unexplored potential, it wasn't something that was the inevitability that it is viewed at in this world here. So completely redefining through planetary ascension what your future is going to be like. You will exit the realm of mortality. That will no longer be an issue for you. You will clear the interstices. You will clear the emotional debris of your own life. You will clear the trauma of Atlantis. You got it, guys? You will clear the trauma of the initial distancing of your consciousness from God, the divine presence, from the source that emanated you. Because you are supposed to come into existence but still stay connected. And then something came along and rearranged your genes and you couldn't stay connected anymore. And that has led to a lot of these feelings of like, is there anybody up there? Does anybody care? I'm down in some SHIT over here. Life is not okay. Does God exist? Did God forget about us? What is going on? And that's the one of the primary traumas of separation from divinity and fear of abandonment. And it is recognized that those are very real traumas. And in the moment of reconnection, it's a beautiful homecoming, but it's also necessary to be able to be spoken to. Be like, okay, I cleared out all of this stuff. Now I can finally reconnect. And like, how did all this stuff happen? And where did this weird stuff come from? And how did we get separated in the first place? And let's never let it happen again. Never let it happen again. I have my little dog, and we have this courtyard here, and there's just like a gate. And she wants to run outside of the gate, and she wants to whatever, like chase a garbage truck or something. And when I get her back, I'm never like yelling at her. I'm always like, stick with me. Never let it happen again. You get it, guys? That is what I'm trying to communicate to you, how the sun and the stars and consciousness feels about you in the sense of like proprietary, love, huge value of what you are, and wanting to reunite with you and protect you and never let it happen again. So there is also something in the remembrance of what you have been through to be able to safeguard you or make you be able to make structural choices, how you set up the world, and behavioral choices, how you respond to it, so that you won't have a repeat experience. Okay, so I got a lot of stuff. There's always stuff. There's always more stuff in my notes that I don't get to, but really, really good. So you're a being of pure love and nothing else, and anything else is a distortion, a perturbation in the field. The light, like light moving through pebbled glass or the watery surface of, a liquid or something like that. Light that is being distorted on its path. The lower vibrational emotions are light being distorted on its path. And heaven, when I talk about the stars and the stellar network, is another word that is mythologized or used to define and describe with emotional language a place that is very real. And then in the same way that the emotional language is used to describe the interstices as a place that is analogous to hell and populated by demons. But I want to make this distinction, and I felt that this is very important but I wanted, okay. Yeah. Make a distinction first, then read the rest of what is here. When we portray hell in common literature and religious cosmology, it is seen as a place not only populated by demons, but where like demons kind of run the joint, and they're laughing away with their pitchforks as they're like sticking innocent people in the butt. Be like, ha ha, I'm having so much fun torturing you. That is not what hell actually is. Hell is not a place where demons or these fragmented consciousnesses are somehow empowered and are then empowered when you enter into their power structure to torture you. And again, there's a lot of movies and stories about this, demons torturing humans, but that should immediately be cleared in terms of your dynamic, your expectation of the power dynamic, because truly consciousness fragments that are in the interstices or in a place that would be considered hell, like they don't have resources, they don't have very much motivation or volition or wiggle room or capacitation to be able to do stuff, because doing stuff requires energy, and technically they're all surrounded with an energy that they can't actually access and make use of. They are in a state of infinite suffering themselves. So the idea, again, that I've kind of promoted, that they're there, they've created an empire, they're getting high on your stash, they're very happy, and that you enter into their realm when you die on the membrane of death, and that they're like, oh good, there now, here's someone I can make more suffering, get you to, I can feed off of you, or to feed off of you in the living. I think it's time to have a whole different way of defining this, not as them living in a luxurious existence in a hell where they are comfortable, but living a very non-luxurious half existence in a state of being that is their own supreme levels of suffering, and that they are not comfortable or empowered in terms of their ability to torment or torture you and to create unhealthy dynamics on your planet. That's a big redirect that I've had to make, and I got that one recently. That was in the past 3 months. As again, I read through with my own microscope through my own body. I'm like, that's a lie. That's not supposed to be there. And I got to that lie finally. And then I was like, wow, that lie is in my own work. So I really have to be certain to articulate the truth. The truth is that these fragments, when they get to the membrane of death, or when they've been kind of hovering there, they're not exalted, empowered, or living a luxury life in any way, that they're actually suffering supremely, and that also their presence and the blockages that they represent also cause suffering in your life, but they are definitely not having a good life. And now I want to get back to my notes, because this part is really positive. The perfect tone of endlessness, frictionless movement of energy on its journey of non-entropic flight through time, because the entropy exists, but it exists somewhere else. So all energy is flowing. There's no entropy. That is what infinity is. That is what love is, and this is what you are. Let me read it again. The perfect tone of endlessness, a frictionless movement of energy, non-entropic. And this is what infinity is, and this is what love is, and this is what you are. Your energy flowing on your journey. And you are largely defined by your flow and your continuation, and the blockages are trying to make you not be you, in the sense of making you be stuck, and you are defined by your flow. So again, as opposed to the interstices is the definition of who you are not. It is energy stuck on your journey, preventing the proper flow of all of the rest of these personality characteristics from going where they need to go. And then how is this energy resolved? I think I've spoken about that a lot, but I'm not talking about hugging and kissing a demon. I'm talking about the resolution of energy, that consciousness residues that might once have been alive. Either they've dug themselves into a hole that's so profound they can't get back to energy, so they go to entropy. Non-beings go to entropy. Anything that's a micron of a soul that is just extremely, extremely off its path does go and get recycled, but it's got a giant debt to pay. All right, so all about planetary ascension, all about the transformation of the planet, of you as a cell on a larger planet. I don't know if that made sense. Transformation of this planet, and the transformation within you as a cell within the larger planet. So you are ascending, the planet is ascending, and our whole entire star system and star network is being affected by this big emotional release. And then I have to talk about New Age shadow work. If I read the last part of my notes, then I will rant. Don't make me get started. Opening the floor to questions and comments, and any extra explanation I can give to give more clarity to this. I hope that I was able to speak well. Wait, let me also read the chat and see if there's anything new on here. Charlie B says, and thank you for being here, says, self-destructive entities seem intent on spending their infinite focus on pursuing an infinite number of quote-unquote wrong directions, and thus seem to reject any offer of resolution. They don't quote-unquote want to explore getting in the right direction. Okay, so this is beautiful. Thank you for being in the class, and thank you for your excellent thinking, because that's very, very truthful. So I'm like the good math teacher, and I'm like the good math student, and I'm always presuming like everybody's trying to do their math homework correctly. And my mind was blown when 2 years ago I was like, what if they're doing their math homework wrong on purpose? I still remember that moment, and I'm like, says no one would do their math homework wrong on purpose, right guys? But no, someone would, but it's not me. That's the whole point. This is actually a pretty good litmus test for you can tell who's the real you and who's not the real you. Because there are some things that are so not the real me that I literally couldn't even imagine them or conceive of them until I met and interacted with them in this world that is here. And then I'm like, that's not only not me, that was inconceivable to me in my truest state. So Charlie B, you're correct. Some of these things that are busy exploring wrong directions, you can tell them like, hey, guys, like you don't have to be on the membrane of death. You don't have to do all these wrong things. You don't have to cause all this suffering. Exit over here, go over here and do this thing over here. And that's doing your math homework right. And they could totally reject that. They could be like, you know something, we're really not interested in doing our math homework correctly, and we think that we'll keep on doing the wrong answers over here. And that was inconceivable to me because, again, I've worked with a lot of systems as Aurora, like on my cosmic journey before I came here. A lot of AIs, a lot of systems, a lot of things. I assess systems and I find the ways in which they're not following patterns correctly. And then I'm like, oh, hey, system, like you're not following this pattern correctly. You should be doing this, this, and this over here. And usually the system is like, oops, my mistake. Let me fix that right up and get back. Now I'm doing the right thing. And only in this circumstance here have I met and interacted with either like these consciousnesses or AIs or whatever it is, some form of technology that is like, oh, I'm doing it wrong and I know I'm doing it wrong and I'm not interested in changing. And then that becomes a completely different circumstance. When you inform something that's doing it wrong and then it keeps on going and doing things in the wrong way, and then it's evident that it is finding some level of personal satisfaction from following that path, that is then a completely different circumstance. So first, to give the benefit of the doubt, or if you're like me, you're just super innocent and you're like, you must have made a mistake. And then you find out, oh, it's a mistake on purpose. Oh, and he wants to keep making it. And then things escalate. Basically, then you get up from, in terms of cosmic law, you get up to other levels of escalation when the guy doesn't want to actually change from that. So very, very, very good point. And I will also say self-destructive particles or characteristics or fragments would be that way, literally because self-destruction is not an innate or truthful characteristic of God, the source, the divine presence, or you or me as light. That really self-preservation and self-construction is the basis of who we are as beings, just like generosity is the basis of who you are as a being. And the sense that you would simply hate yourself, not want to exist, or want to destroy yourself, and maybe even destroy the entire fabric of reality in the process of destroying yourself, is not the real you. It's not the real divine presence. It's not who any of us really, really are. But I have had to learn, like, oh, I must acknowledge self-destruction is a thing. It exists. It makes people eat like whatever, too many Doritos. They're like, I know I shouldn't eat this, but I'm doing it. That is the essence of self-destruction. Again, I love you, even if you've eaten a lot of Doritos in your life. But hopefully you can relate to that, or whatever is your thing. Sometimes it's people like smoking tobacco. They're like, I'm doing this thing. It's very bad for me. I know I shouldn't do it. I'm doing it anyway. And it's just inconceivable to me because I smoked tobacco for like a very, very brief amount of time when I first came here as Aurora, because I was doing all the things that people did around me. And then I learned like, there are some things that you should not do. They do it. It's normal here. But there are things that you should not do. It was the beginning of me being able to make this distinction and learn about that. So again, not being self-destructive. As soon as I learned about it, I'm like, oh no, like you have to stop doing this. And I am similar with foods and other things like that too. You find out that it's not good, you don't do it because you're not self-destructive, or anything, even whatever, certain forms of exercise or activities or thought forms. Like you find out better, you do better, and you stop doing the behavior because otherwise that would be self-destructive. That, what I just described to you, is literally you are, as a divine being, on a journey of soul exploration. You learn and grow. You don't know everything. Your mistakes are forgiven to you because you didn't know. Oh, like that's not what I'm supposed to do. And then as soon as you learn what you're supposed to do, you're like, let me change. Let me fix it. Let me go in a better direction. This is the true nature of your being. And so the defensiveness or self-destruction that we see in these negative characteristics, negative thought entities, fragmented entities, or total non-beings does not reflect the true nature of the personality of God, the personality of what God actually is. Lisa says, thank you for flying rainbow lasagna. Thank you for being here. And thank you for clarifying there are so many distortions in this process. So many teachings of quantum that are saying that timelines are not real. Looking forward to our organic graduation timeline. Thank you for being here. Very welcome, Lisa. Beautiful point. First of all, thank you, and thank you for your own efforts with your own personal life and add to planetary ascension. And I think that that's a very important thing for me to be able to acknowledge. So, quantum things exist, although it is in a non-analytical, non-rational state. And human science that began in like the 1600s was about rationalism, things that you could measure with a microscope or measure with a ruler, and things that made sense to the intellectual, analytical mind. And the quantum science world that began in the early 1900s was literally what happened when you pushed the analytical mind envelope to the stretching point. Not the breaking point, but the stretching point. And it gets to a certain point where the intellect is like, I can't understand stuff anymore, because the intellect is used to looking at stuff like billiard balls and chopping things up into pieces. And when you chop it up into pieces and you're like, there's not actually stuff here anymore, you just have a waveform. Then it doesn't know how to deal with the waveform. I can make a lot of jokes about people not knowing how to deal with me as a waveform. But your intellect, it's an intellectual limitation, and guess what? That's part of the implantation. That's part of the genetic degradation. The implantation of the intellect, verbalization, and the analytical mind. These are all the things that you have to learn to supersede in order to reconnect with the sun. And so I had lots of lessons from 10 years ago about meditation and mindfulness, because that was before poop crapola waves. And that used to be enough. Like, yep, you're going to meditate, you're going to do mindfulness, you're going to do self-observation, self-watching, get your inner bicycle wheels to move at a faster and faster and faster rate, go into nonverbal states, and reconnect with the sun. Like, that was pretty normal. But now you got these things that are these, millimeter waves and different repeaters and implanted limiters. I call them Bergerons, from a different Kurt Vonnegut story called Harrison Bergeron, where there were like these different super beings, and they were limited in their society by these implantations of like microchips or whatever gross deformities that were made out of their limbs or something like that, because they were so hyper capable that they had to do all these things on them in order to diminish them. So that's what I call these nano implantation Bergerons, that they are there to take you away from your superpowers and make you, not know how supremely capable you are in the things that you can actually do. So now it's just much, much, much more challenging to be able to connect to the sun and the stars and give these real-time broadcasts of what's going on, literally because of different, very unjust forms of technology that have been perpetrated upon humanity and the ascension process here. And ascension is an inevitability. It's going to happen. It's just, this has been very difficult, uncomfortable, and taking longer than it actually has to take. And it's not necessarily for the purposes of your soul growth. Very, very difficult ascension process. All right, just overtly stating that for you here, so that way you don't feel, so that way you actually have something to calibrate to, so you know how challenging, how much you have been challenged, and how difficult and unusual this whole entire, how extreme the situation is. And the extreme intensity and peril of this situation is also pointed at the sun and the stars. Like, it's very difficult here, it's very difficult there too. Not a pleasure cruise up there either. Difficult in both places. So the reductionist view, like Lisa is sharing here about the teachings about what quantum is, and saying that timelines aren't real or that timelines don't exist. There's some aspect of disassociation that is what I've noticed humanity doing some of in these past couple of years, as people explore different reality states and different cosmologies or stories or narrative structures that define what is actually going on and what is real in life. I've noticed some people dabbling in different narrative story structures that might be about certain things not being real, like even talking about NPCs or non-player characters, which I have defined now as spiritual class warfare. Yeah, That's it. Because so I'm not condoning that at all, but people are starting to be like, wow, like some people don't feel real, or some people do feel real, or some events in life feel real, or some other things don't feel real. That I will validate. But then the conclusions that are drawn and the social dynamics and hierarchies that are created as a result of them, I will not validate. So your world should be, during this ascension process, feeling less and less real, or maybe more and more real. But let's say more and more fluid, more of a super reality, not like a dreamlike reality where nothing matters, but a super reality where everything matters. And I caution against the disassociated state, because in the disassociated state, that is where you can allow a huge amount of suffering, either of yourself or others. And the infestation technology, the wetware and millimeter waves, that is one of the things that uses as a consciousness parasite to get you to not fight back, to be kind of like, it's not real, don't fight back. It's not real, it's just an illusion. Wait, I'll make some silly things. It's just an illusion. Don't fight back. And meanwhile, it's like a giant monster is chomping on your face, but it's saying like, hey, I'm just an illusion, don't fight back. And it's actually the huge, most real peril you can possibly face. That's a direct analogy of what you are experiencing right now as humans. That the augmented reality is part of a monstrous, attempt to devour you and to devour your soul and to bring you into a completely like non-real virtual reality. That's the real like toilet bowl flush. If you get out of the biological realm and you're in just like a computer stuck in nightmare world, and then don't really have a way to be able to transit back, and your conscience just stuck there. That's bad stuff. And the disassociation is saying like, don't worry, it doesn't matter, none of this is real, let it all happen. And that's like definitely not something that I would want you to do at all. I would want you to recognize the situation, recognize your peril, fight back with everything you have, maintain your mind, maintain your consciousness, and never give up no matter what. Please, 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 please. Please fight with everything you have. And the fighting with everything you have is not necessarily a fisticuffs or projectile, whatever, systems or something like that. I'm talking about fighting with your spirit and with your soul, and maintaining your freedom and maintaining your boundaries and maintaining your own willpower and your own sense of self. That is really what has been what has been assaulted here in large part has been human free will. And free will is directly related to your soul, because it's how you choose where you go. In the giant array of timelines and possibilities and probabilities, you must be able to choose freely where you go in order to say you have a soul. And if someone else does soul yoinkage, or they force you someplace or whatever, that is being imprisoned and diminished and not able to fully explore and express who you are as a divine creature. It's how you don't get to have a soul. So saying that timelines aren't real or don't exist is perilously close to saying, don't worry, none of this is real, let the monster eat your face, swirl down the cosmic toilet. It's really important to stay engaged, not to disassociate, even as you might recognize that there are certain reality structures that are, timelines that are not what you're experiencing, that don't have a presence in reality. And we have been experiencing a lot of these things. So people's minds have been very fluid, realities have been very fluid. People come up with different explanations for what they think is actually going on. Like some people, I don't even know if I want to open this can of worms, but the Mandela effect, which I think is partially timeline transformations, but also partially misremembered song lyrics. And that people's minds are very fluid, and that they're saying, no, I come from this timeline, I remember it very, very clearly. But that's not that. But I will tell you, it's Bernstein, not Berenstain. Bernstein, all right? Good. Yeah, good. All right, can of worms. Just closed. I'm closing that can of worms. And Pedro, thank you for being here, says, do we notice if we rectify something, or do we just accept the rectified thing as being that way since the beginning? So beautiful. Deep question. Thank you for that. I think both things have happened to me. Some things I have danced and I have rectified, and it was as if it was perfect from the beginning, and there was never any suffering or never any trauma or never any lack or never anything that needed to be fixed. But then sometimes I dance and I rectify and change and shift something, and the shift is very evident, and I have a clear demarcation. Like that's the way it used to be, and I remember the bad old days, and then I now celebrate that this has shifted in this way. And usually what happens is I recognize incremental shifts. So hardly ever is it a light switch where it's like, it used to be 100% doo-doo, and now it's 100% sunshine and rainbows. It's usually like something that was very, very, very wrong, and then there is the moment of incremental shift where I can really see something, but it's not a full shift, but something definitely changed, and then it goes more and more and more and more and more from that moment. And then I recognize things are not the same as they were in the beginning, but some things are a change that I can feel radiates backwards through time or propagates through the entirety of time, and even goes forward and propagates forward into the future. And those things are like very deep soul things that are not like a Mandela effect or misremembered song lyric, but really more of like a definition of self, that when that deep healing happens and that rectification happens in the story of my life or the story of a dynamic or a relationship, I'm like, oh, it was always like this, and then it will always be like this. It feels more like a total rightness and a total alignment, and like feels like I was going at this wrong direction over here, and now I'm in this proper direction over here. And of course, I'm in this reality structure where everything that was in the past that led me up into this moment, it's actually like redefining the past. You get to kind of redefine the past. You guys are shaking your heads in an acknowledgement that you've had something similar. Yeah, Pedro's joking. He says, Luke, I'm your father. That's how I remember the movie scene. And I remember that too. He says, Luke, I am your father. But now they're saying Mandela effect. He says, no, I am your father. Okay, and there's another one too that is mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And that now that supposedly it says something different, but I know that's how it went. And so some of these things, I think maybe it's not even just that the human psyche is misremembering things, but I think that some things are so reliant upon the affirmation of a digital record, and digital records are easily changed. What if you just scrubbed the entire internet of every single clip of, the Empire Strikes Back, or every single clip of Sleeping Beauty, and you just make all of the YouTube clips and all of the videos and all of the Netflix is different? Doesn't mean you've changed reality. It just means you've sanitized the present very effectively, but not necessarily changed reality. So that is the challenge and the peril of keeping most of our records in a digital format, that you don't have something that is literally like megalithic, carved in stone, and that would take a huge amount of effort to be able to change what is written there. It takes almost nothing, just a little algorithm, just a little tiny algorithm to go through and change different wordings, and keep that in mind, and also to change the way that people look in photos. That I think I told someone this. I went back and I looked up the runner named Florence Griffith Joyner, and all of the photos of her looked slightly different than I remembered. And I'm like, that's interesting, but I think I'm going to trust my memory. But then maybe everything got scrubbed or sanitized, so then it just becomes difficult to make that distinction. So Ascension is a time when reality is very malleable and very fluid, and that's positive, because you want to be able to let go of baggage and define yourself as the light being moving forward, but also you should have a clear definition of the things that have actually happened, a clear remembrance of history, never be gaslit in either your personal dynamics with other relationships with people, or historical, political. You can't just be like, oh yes, let's just all forget about whatever, some huge political scandal or something like that in the essence of being on a new timeline. So this is big stuff when you navigate timelines. What level of responsibility do you owe to keeping the narrative straight, and remembering what you came out of, in reference to what you are currently experiencing. So there are some things that are still unresolved traumas in terms of political corruption that people are still hashing about. You know what I mean? Like unsecured emails that were kept on an unsecured server, so such and such Dropbox. And these are things that actually it's valid that they should have been addressed. But at a certain point, like, those are far in the rearview mirror. And I noticed them too on a lot of my Facebook memories. And I'm like, oh, I remember when everyone was wrangling about that. And I remember everyone was wrangling about that. But I just question myself now, not that do I remember it, I remember that those events happened, but I question their relevance to my journey at its present moment. Just as with my lessons, I recognize I recorded them 10 chronological years ago, but 10 million billion miles in terms of spiritual growth and perspective. Same thing with my perspective about different political scandals that have gone unrecognized and unresolved and unpunished, and whether I feel like do I really need everyone to know about this? As many years ago, I was like very much like, I need people to know about this. I need for this to change. I need for this to be recognized and acknowledged. Now I feel differently, and I feel like that is fine. I haven't gotten amnesia. I still remember those things. They just feel very much in the rearview mirror and not as relevant to my present journey as other things. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I've given up on justice or any kind of thing like that. It just means that I've gone much more in the direction of focusing on personal attainment and spiritual growth, and much less on the outer trappings of political iniquities and corruptions and the stories that are the narratives that were being upheld by the entire consciousness collective. And this is, I think probably a good thing for me to end on too. I'll end in a few moments, but to wrap things up, you do have to have an entirety experience to be able to get to be a light eater. Like, you have to pretty much heal the entire dynamic of everything. And at the same time, you are personally responsible and responsive to your relationship with the sun. So this is, I think when I was much more focused on, like, I need for people to know about this political corruption story that's going on, I needed for other people to, have a cognitive experience. But now I'm like, I can allow people their cognitive experience or their lack of cognitive experience. I'm doing my relationship with the sun and my relationship with reality and literally with matter and literally with, the structure of reality, that then I don't require a consensus from everyone in the entire world to be able to do that. These things are not in conflict, but I just want you to know that my efforts and intention have, mercifully shifted away from having to, you might have had something similar where you felt like you had to awaken the collective or talk to lots of people about this or make sure that people knew about this. But just in my own journey, at a certain point, I was like, no, I don't feel like I have to get everybody, these are not the right words, because I want to say get or force, but to, at my convenience, have other people have their clarity of thought and awakenings and cognitive experiences. I very, very much have focused into, I am focused on my inner experience, connection, divine connection to the sun, manifestation abilities, and also the people that are in alignment with me, the people that are moving at that rate, the people that are moving at a positive rate, to be able to spend my time and my energy with those who are already in a frictionless state, flowing in the same direction as me, and not so much at trying to get other people to think in a way that is convenient to me. So, but that's it. But in the end, you do have to have all of these different systems healed, and you can't be, trying to be a light eater while you have a very, very huge distorted system and chemtrails that are going on, and millimeter waves, more and more encroachment, and stronger anti-life frequencies in your world. You have to do something about it. But then, in order to do something about it, you don't necessarily need a consensus from everyone in the world. You do get levels of personal attainment where you are able to do things, and that is also what I do. I hope that wasn't too confusing. I didn't want to end on something confusing, like, Aurora, should we do something? Should we not do something? Is it this or is it this? I know, don't worry, but I hope that I spoke well. Christine says, leading by example. Thank you so much, as always, Aurora. You are very, very welcome. I think, thank you. I feel like I want to leave on a good note. I feel like it was necessary for me to change my approach, that my approach evolved, and that's also a part of what this soul journey and ascension is for all of us, individual and collective. That you have certain ways of being at a certain part where you're like, this feels right, and then you must allow yourself at another part of the journey to be like, nope, now I'm doing this feels right. So for me, my motivation changed, and then I'm always amazed when I look back on, like I said, the record of different social media platforms of what I was talking about and what was very important to me then, that I felt it was important for me to get a resolution of certain political corruptions at a certain time. And now I feel like, something, I don't need to see that come to justice in order to be able to do my spiritual attainment. And that's kind of big, because it's like, this is part of traveling light and traveling without baggage, like just a recalibration of what is truly important and what are the things that I truly need to see as events in the world, and what are things that now seem to be deprioritized. That is the best way I can say this, that I have been able to deprioritize my need for what I thought would be an event of unfolding justice, and to have a different level of expectation of the rectification of the entire fabric of the space-time collective. And that, you won't necessarily have that moment of like nanny poo-poo, like I was right. I even have a t-shirt that I made years ago that says I was right on it. For that, like anybody who needs a t-shirt, there you go, you got it, just wear the t-shirt. I was right about all of this. But we're at a different level now. And even just from October 14th and moving through the eclipse portal on that date, we're in a different reality context now, where just those things are not as prevalent and they're deprioritized, and there are other things that are much more prioritized and that are much more valid to be focused on in terms of your soul's attainment. Your soul is a very, very big thing. It's a very, very long journey, and it's much, much more than just a small inconvenience. Dealing with a small inconvenience in the world. Your soul and the things that you're doing here and the attainment that you're doing here in terms of personal and planetary ascension. This is a big rectification, a big justice. Like you get it. Like you can do here's the little tiny Tonka truck of one little political scandal from a few years ago, and then here's the fall of Atlantis, humans having to become food eaters instead of light eaters, genetic modifications that were done against your willpower over many generations, present implantation of nano wetware and attempts to hijack your soul and destroy your mind. These are the bigger things that really matter in terms of being rectified. That's what I'm trying to say. That just took a lot of words to get out, but thank you for that. So, any more questions or comments? I should end on a good note. And I don't know, I didn't really speak that much. I have spoken a little bit about the eclipse portal from, there we go. Oh, Charlie B is so sweet. Thank you very much. He just says in capital letters, thank you. You're so very welcome. Pedro, thank you very much. And Lisa, thank you. Thank you as well. And Pedro says, love lasagna. Pedro, always appreciate you and always give you credit for some of our acronyms here. Says, today's serving had a rich rectifying flavor with a side of unconditional love. Beautiful. I love that. I love that. I love that. Yes. Everything that I'm trying to talk about when I do these lessons now is what is the present, what are the signposts now? Is the things that I was talking about 10 years ago were great for where we were 10 years ago, and then all the things that I'm talking about now are about what do we need to be doing now. So because if I say certain things about the occupiers of the membrane of death, then you're like, great, I'm going to spend 100% of my ascension energy vacuuming up naughty evil ones and sending them back to the galactic central sun. And I am very aware that I could influence you possibly in the wrong direction. And I'll also, actually, this is a good thing for me to end on. Ascension is actually supposed to be one of the most comfortable, fun, and fulfilling levels of self-exploration and creativity that you can do. It's not supposed to be scrubbing the cosmic toilet all the time. It's not supposed to be doing the laundry, doing the dishes, cleaning up traumas and stuff that's not fair and injustices and speaking to all of these things and then haggling about cosmic law and establishing boundaries. I'm melting. You can tell I'm melting just talking about all those things. No, actually, Ascension is supposed to kick ass. It's supposed to be so much fun. It's supposed to be about envisioning imagining what you want for your future, growing into greater levels of possibility with your body, building completely unimaginable levels of like telepathic connection, like between hawks and bunnies and microbes, having all of these amazing expansive conversations and intangible, priceless experiences that are far beyond the value of like a diamond or a bar of gold, beyond materialism. It's supposed to be this most expansive, amazing thing. If you guys knew how much you got lost or stolen or misappropriated from you, you would be extremely angry and definitely be shaking your hand at the Cosmic Complaints Department. You've had millions of dollars worth of fun stolen from you. You got to get it back, and you got to focus on that. That is what Ascension is really supposed to be about, this amazing, expansive, creative experience and activity, not endless, whatever, assessments of traumas, wounding, healing, and all of that stuff. We have to do all of that stuff, but that is not the basis of who you are or the definition of who you are. And the fun stuff, like, just stay focused like that. We should and shall manifest a time for us to be able to do that, because that's what you're really here for. That's what you're really here for. Have a joyful reconnection with the sun and the stars. Remember yourself as God. Be re-empowered. Like, finish cleaning up the dirty laundry and then do fun, good stuff. That is what I would really like. And then you won't be worried about political scandals and other things like that. That will really be deprioritized in your life. That's something good to end on. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone. We'll end the recording for right now.